Alina Shikhet was born in Ivanovo, Russia, and moved to the USA with her family when she was just 3 years old. From a young age, she exhibited remarkable talent and had a deep passion for singing, dancing, and acting. Her beauty and talent attracted the attention of many. Her journey in the performing arts began at the age of 4 at a European rhythmic gymnastics school. By the time she turned 5, she was already performing solo at competitions outside her home state. During her elementary school years, she attended the Tali Dance School, where she quickly took on leading roles in various dance performances. With her extraordinary talent, Alina mastered many dance styles and techniques that took other children years to learn. She often performed alongside older, more experienced dancers. In 5th grade, Alina joined Dindi Studio, where she explored various dance styles such as hip-hop, jazz, and ballet. In celebration of her Russian heritage, she even portrayed a prima ballerina. She participated in competitions at Stage New York, including Broadway, where she consistently won awards for her outstanding performances. She showcased her skills at numerous local events in Pittsburgh, taking part in celebrations such as Up Night, parades, Christmas events, and gatherings in Robinson, Taunton, and nearby areas. Thanks to the confidence Alina gained from dancing, she also discovered her talent for singing, captivating listeners with her beautiful interpretations of famous songs, whether she was performing on stage or for her family at home. When Alina was 14 years old, she sustained a severe knee injury during a ballet class and had to undergo complex surgery. After months of physical therapy, she received the devastating news that she could no longer dance in competitions or for enjoyment. Despite this setback, she remained resolute and refused to give up on her determination to return to the stage. She became involved in musical theater, allowing her to continue pursuing her passion for dance. She excelled as a talented actress, dancer, vocalist, and comedian, receiving tears, smiles, and loud applause for her performances. Alina also sang in the school choir and performed at various city events, always bringing joy to those who watched her. Although her injury prevented her from building a career in dance and the performing arts, it inspired her to pursue a medical career. She aspired to become a doctor or physical therapist, wanting to help others recover from injuries that hinder their dreams. Alina graduated from Montu in 2015 and spent her first 2 years of college at the University of Pittsburgh in Greensburg. She was part of a community focused on outdoor activities and service, even serving as the vice president of the organization. During the spring semester of 2017, she enjoyed participating in events that benefited children and animals. Alina later transferred to the main campus in Pittsburgh with the goal of becoming a physical therapist. She lives in a house with other students and goes to bed one night after sending her friend, Zach Brandner, the pictures they had just taken. This was her last message. The following morning, Alina's parents, Ellie and Yen, arrived to pick her up for a walk in the park and to attend a charity event supporting breast cancer awareness. Ellie rang the doorbell and asked Zach if Alina was awake, as she had not answered their calls. Her father, Yen, was still in the car with their dog when her mother, Ellie, began knocking on the door of the room. When no one answered, she continued knocking for about 5 minutes, progressively becoming more forceful. As fear set in, she started shaking the door. Meanwhile, the dog barked incessantly. Ellie called Yen into the house before kicking down the door. At that moment, Zach was on the stairs and could only hear screams. Yen rushed upstairs and peeked into the room, where he found Alina lying with her arms stretched out and half her face unrecognizable. It was hard to comprehend what had happened, as she was in a pool of her own blood. Zach dialed for an ambulance, and the siren shattered the morning silence, serving as a reminder that someone's life was in danger. When the ambulance arrived, the doctors hurried inside. Ellie met them at the door, trembling and tearful. She led them to the room where her daughter lay on the floor. Sadly, the doctors had to confirm Alina's death. The police cordoned off the house as part of their investigation. Police Chief Scott Schubert reported that an expert determined Alina's death was a homicide, resulting from both blunt force and acute trauma to the head. Authorities had already identified a suspect in the case, Alina's ex-boyfriend, 21-year-old Matthew Darby. Alina and Matthew met while she was studying at the University of Pittsburgh in Greensburg. After their breakup in 2015 to 2016, Alina informed the police that Matthew had illegally entered her home on September 20th. She filed a report detailing how he had climbed a drain pipe to reach the second floor and broken into her house through a window. Matthew's actions were prompted by Alina ending their relationship and not responding to his calls. In her report, Alina described a previous incident of violence, stating that he had grabbed her, pushed her, insulted her, exhibited jealousy, and attempted to control her. Alina's father, Yen, noted that he and his wife, Ellie, had attended court with their daughter the week prior to obtain a protection order against Matthew in connection with this case. Matthew was arrested for trespassing and released on a $10,000 bail on September 26. In an interview, Alina's roommate, Zach, expressed ongoing concerns about Alina and Matthew's relationship. He recalled an incident from the previous month when Matthew yelled at Alina outside their window. Zach mentioned that this was just one of many unpredictable outbursts from Matthew. He noted that Matthew even monitored Alina's social media activity. If she liked a photo of another guy on Instagram, Matthew would react very aggressively. Matthew had access to Alina's social media accounts and would go in to remove likes from her posts because he knew her passwords. This behavior occurred before their breakup, but afterward, Alina changed all her passwords. Matthew also prohibited her from wearing clothes that he deemed too revealing. After their breakup, Alina blocked his number. However, on September 20th, after their breakup, he broke into her home. Zach stated that he heard glass breaking outside at around 12:30 a.m. He sent a message in their home chat and didn't think much of it. Shortly after, he heard a loud crash and a scream from upstairs. It was Alina crying for help because Matthew was in her room. Alina's phone was not found when her apartment was later searched, but records indicate she did not answer multiple calls from a number that was identified as Matthew's between 4:15 and 4:55 a.m. that Sunday. According to police, the last known location of Alina's phone was near the intersection of A76 and Route 30, close to Irvine. A driver reported to police that he had taken Matthew to the intersection of Seal Street and Ward Street in Oakland. Matthew exited the vehicle and asked the driver to wait for 10 minutes. After that time, he requested another 10 minutes. When he asked to wait longer, the driver finally left because he could not wait any longer. Investigators later found surveillance footage of Matthew disposing of items in a manhole near Seal Street, not far from Alina's home. Pittsburgh Police Homicide Detective Edward Fair reported that he and other officers discovered 2 knives and a hammer in the same manhole cover. Hair and skin were found attached to one of the knives. Based on this evidence, police obtained a warrant for the arrest of Matthew Darby. He faces charges of murder, trespassing, attempting to evade capture, theft, and possession of a weapon used in a crime. He was apprehended in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, after a concerned citizen reported seeing him attempt to break into a window of a house. When the police arrived, they found a man who matched Matthew's description and confirmed his identity. He received additional charges for providing false information to the police in a public place. Each of these charges carries a potential fine and up to 30 days in jail. During a court hearing in South Carolina, Matthew's bail was denied, with the judge labeling him a potential flight risk. The judge informed Matthew of his right to an extradition hearing. When given the option, he chose to consult with his lawyer first. He also declined to testify about the South Carolina charges without legal representation. Alina's friends, many of whom are students at the University of Pittsburgh, attended the court session alongside her family. They brought signs to raise awareness about domestic violence and advocated for Alina's Law, a bill in the state legislature aimed at allowing judges to mandate electronic monitoring of high-risk domestic abusers. The judge confirmed all charges against Matthew, which include murder, attempted escape, trespassing, theft, and possession of a weapon for criminal use. Prosecutors provided evidence that Matthew was on the Duquesne University campus during the night of October 7th to 8th, where he was seen by University police officer Raymond Ma. Matthew inquired about directions to the Briar Hall dorms. Surveillance footage showed him in various locations on campus, including the Student Union, where a police officer permitted him to enter to charge his phone. Officer Raymond Ma observed that he seemed anxious and had a slight scent of alcohol. One photograph presented by prosecutors shows a man identified as Matthew wearing a striped Rush shirt with the Miller Beer logo while in a campus elevator. This shirt was found among Matthew's belongings when he was arrested a few days later. Prosecutors indicated that evidence released on January 19, 2018, shows Matthew in a Duquesne University elevator hours before he was said to be at his home in Oakland. However, Matthew's attorney, David Schrager, challenged this assertion, claiming the video does not clearly show that it was Matthew. Later, around 4 a.m., Matthew ordered an Uber that took him from his Briar Hall dorm to a street near his home, suggesting that someone else could have accessed Matthew's account. He fled the Pittsburgh area but was apprehended by police in Myrtle Beach 3 days later. Pittsburgh police discovered 2 knives in a manhole in Oakland, which they collected as evidence. Matthew is accused of discarding the knives after leaving Alina's home, where police claim he attacked her to death. Matthew's attorney, David Schrager, noted that the evidence presented at the preliminary hearing was weak and that he was not surprised by the outcome. Prosecutors announced their intention to pursue the death penalty for Matthew, citing that he had violated a protection order requested by Alina. Additionally, Alina had previously testified against Matthew, who has a history of violent crimes and threats. To avoid the death penalty, Matthew agreed to plead guilty to first-degree murder, which carries an automatic life sentence without the possibility of parole. Alina was a vibrant student aspiring to become a physical therapist. Ellie, Alina's mother, confronted Matthew, asking if her daughter's death made him happy and expressing her belief that he had failed. During the court proceedings, Matthew, wearing a red prison jumpsuit and a long-sleeve white shirt, only answered the judge's questions directly. When asked why he pleaded guilty, he stated that it was because he was guilty. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, a mandatory sentence for first-degree murder, and he also admitted guilt to charges of burglary, trespassing, and possession of an instrument of crime linked to Alina's murder. In a related case regarding the break-in at Alina's apartment 2 weeks before the murder, Matthew also pleaded guilty. A year later, Matthew, now with a new lawyer named Joseph Hudak, filed an appeal, arguing that his previous attorney had provided inadequate legal representation. He claimed that his previous attorney did not conduct a thorough risk analysis or properly explain the situation to him. In response, District Attorney Allegheny's office stated that Matthew's claims were likely to fail but acknowledged that a hearing might be necessary. Their decision was influenced by a principle known as the coordinating jurisdiction rule, which prevents judges in the same district from overturning each other's rulings. Matthew's lawyer, Joseph Hudak, viewed this as the first step toward overturning Matthew's life sentence. Matthew is actively seeking to be released from prison, but so far, all his attempts have been unsuccessful. He is currently serving a life sentence. Although Alina's family deeply feels her loss, they take pride in her enduring legacy and the positivity she brought to the world. In the face of their tragedy, they channeled their grief into a greater purpose. Alongside friends and community activists, they established a foundation in her name to support victims of domestic violence. The Alina Sheikhette Foundation aims to help young women nationwide access the support and protection they need when facing abuse, while also advocating for laws that safeguard victims. The foundation organizes workshops and educational initiatives to create safe spaces for those in fear to seek help. It collaborates with law enforcement and legal professionals to devise innovative protection methods for domestic violence victims, including electronic bracelets for offenders and mandatory notifications for breaches of protection orders. Additionally, they host annual charity events and marathons to fundraise for victims. Alina's legacy extends beyond her passing. She left a mark on this world that will save lives and contribute to positive change. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Noreen Boyle. John Boyle Jr. is a chiropractor in Mansfield, Ohio. He has a successful practice, which is considered one of the best in the state. John and his wife, Noreen Boyle, have been married for over 20 years and have 2 children. In 1989, their eldest son, Collier, turned 11. They also adopted a 3-year-old daughter from Taiwan named Elizabeth. Noreen was born into a working-class family in Philadelphia and worked as a dental hygienist. She supported John through his schooling in the early years of their marriage, but after Collier was born, she became a stay-at-home mom. Thanks to John's successful career, the family enjoys a comfortable life. Their children attend private schools, travel, shop, and experience the World Cup without financial worries. Although the couple appears to be a model family from the outside, John has a disturbing personality. He was often abusive to his wife and displayed controlling behavior. Furthermore, he was unfaithful. John frequently pursued relationships with other women, a fact known to his friends, family, and Noreen. For years, she tolerated his behavior in an attempt to preserve the marriage for the sake of their children, despite being aware of his infidelity and his constant pursuit of younger women. Whenever she confronted him about his affairs, he reacted violently. In general, John could not tolerate any criticism of himself. Noreen's son, Collier, also felt the effects of his father's behavior from a young age. However, this situation could not last forever. In December 1989, Noreen filed for divorce. John did not want to end their marriage because he was happy with his family life and relationships. In an attempt to save their marriage, he planned to move his family and private practice to Erie, Pennsylvania, nearly 2 hours away from their old home. Their situation was not as promising as he had hoped. John persuaded Noreen to stay for New Year's and to continue working on their problems afterward. The family celebrated the holidays at their old home, with John's mother in attendance. He asked his mother to babysit the children because he planned to leave again after midnight when everyone was in bed. Later, Noreen and John argued on New Year's Eve. Elizabeth, the youngest daughter in the family, was confused by the situation, and Collier was worried. John's mother put Collier to bed, and just as he was about to fall asleep, he suddenly heard Noreen's loud scream, followed by 2 thuds, as if something had hit the wall, and then silence. Afterward, someone walked around the house for a long time, even opening the door and standing in the doorway for a while. Collier was so frightened that he pretended to be asleep and stayed that way until morning. Despite his fear, 11-year-old Collier got out of bed early on January 1. When everything was quiet, he explored the house. His mother was missing, but John seemed to be either awake or not yet asleep. Collier asked his father where his mother was. John replied that she had left after their argument. He assured Collier that she would be back soon, and John's mother agreed with him. The boy waited for Noreen to return, but days passed without her. Shelley Bowden, Noreen's best friend, had been in close contact with her, especially during her divorce. Shelley was quick to criticize John's claims about Noreen's disappearance. She had planned to meet Noreen for lunch just after New Year's to discuss important matters, but Noreen never showed up and ignored her calls. This behavior was completely out of character for the Noreen she knew, and Shelley worried that something was wrong. Shelley repeatedly stressed that Noreen would never abandon her child under any circumstances. Out of concern, Shelley reported Noreen missing to the police. However, the police dismissed her concerns and reminded her that adults have the right to go wherever they want, without informing anyone. Shelley argued that Noreen was a responsible woman who would never leave her child. especially a 3-year-old who needed her. Collier picked up the phone book, found the police station number, and reported that something was wrong with his mother. The police responded quickly and went to Noreen's house. When they arrived, they immediately noticed that the boy looked scared and desperate for help. Unfortunately, they were unable to communicate effectively, but the police could see the fear in Collier's eyes, especially when he glanced at his father. When John asked the police who had contacted them, they did not reveal the truth, lying that one of Noreen's relatives had called. However, the police accepted John's explanation that she had simply left after an argument, and everyone believed it. Noreen was reported missing, and weeks passed without anyone questioning John's claim that she had left. However, Collier could not believe that his mother would abandon him. After hearing Noreen's relative's story, the police returned to Noreen's house. They searched every room thoroughly, but found no alarming evidence. Forensic experts examined the house and found no signs of foul play. Despite this, the police were able to speak to Collier, who recounted what he had heard on New Year's Eve, including Noreen's suspicious screams and banging on the walls. There was strong suspicion that John was involved in his wife's disappearance. Collier's sister, Elizabeth, who was 3 years old at the time, may have witnessed the incident. She told the police that she saw her father hit her mother on the head, then put her on the floor and wrapped her up like a snowman. However, due to her age, her testimony was not considered in the investigation. Soon after, a pregnant young woman named Sherry Lee Campbell moved into their home, replacing his wife. John claimed that Sherry was not pregnant with his child, and that they had only met after his wife had gone missing. He said that he had taken pity on Sherry and offered to let her stay. He also mentioned serious problems in his marriage and stated that Sherry would leave when his wife returned. While investigating the missing persons case, the police discovered revealing information about John's personal life. It turned out that his relationship with Sherry had been going on for much longer than he had admitted. There was a strong possibility that she was pregnant with his child, casting doubt on his story. Despite alarming details that raised suspicions, no concrete evidence was ever found, and Noreen remains missing. Furthermore, the theory that she ran away seems implausible. She had not made any purchases, used any credit cards, or contacted her children or relatives for weeks, which was highly suspicious. While examining the house and piecing together the events of Noreen's final days before her disappearance, the police learned that Noreen had been suffering from John's betrayal and infidelity for years. Sherry was the one having an affair with John, which drove Noreen away from her family. Sherry claimed that she only started dating John after his wife went missing, which was clearly untrue. Collier sought help because he was afraid of staying with his father, whom he believed was a murderer. While searching John's car, Collier discovered a photo of Sherry taken before New Year's. He considered showing it to the police. The photo was taken in front of a new house, so they decided to visit that location. Unfortunately, John refused to let them in, and they needed evidence to obtain a search warrant. More than 2 weeks after Noreen went missing, the police began to take the case more seriously, as her prolonged silence raised suspicions. Police discovered John's banking activities. They discovered that during the time Noreen was reported missing, John had made suspicious transactions. John rented a drill and purchased cleaning supplies from a hardware store, as well as quick-dry cement. He also frequently filled up gas in Erie, possibly during his visits to the new home. The investigation has now shifted its focus to the new house, as no evidence of a crime was found at the John family's old home. Collier said he noticed a ring on Sherry's finger that belonged to the boy's mother. He told his father this directly. The situation became more concerning when John told Collier that they were going to a neighboring state for fun the next day. He suggested a trip to a forest in the Highlands, which sounded very ominous and raised fears for the boy's safety. When the police arrived at the newly renovated house in Erie, It was clear that John had put a lot of effort into both the interior and exterior. However, the investigation focused on finding clues related to Noreen's disappearance and rescuing a boy from his father. The police searched the house meticulously, as such environments could hide bodies or evidence of a crime. The most intriguing discovery was in the basement. In a nearly empty room that was being renovated, they found a new carpet. When the rug was pulled back, they discovered a rectangle of freshly poured concrete. This anomaly caught the attention of the police, prompting them to investigate further by removing the concrete. While removing the concrete, they detected the smell of a decomposing human body. After completely removing the floor, they found a makeshift grave containing the body of a woman. Everyone immediately believed that this was Noreen's body. In the 3 weeks since her disappearance, the body had decomposed significantly. The condition of the body was so poor that dental records were needed for identification. Collier did not have to go with his father into the woods, where the boy could have been in danger. The police found the necessary evidence, ensuring that the boy was taken to Child Protective Services, where he would be safe. However, Noreen's tragic death was a huge shock to Collier. The boy had a deep bond with his mother. Noreen was not only his mother, but also his best friend. After discovering Noreen's body in her new home in Erie, the police found an expensive watch on her, which also served as a means of identification. Noreen's relatives noticed that her wedding ring was missing. According to a forensic expert, Noreen died between the night of December 31 and January 1. The police interviewed potential witnesses, especially neighbors who may have seen something unusual. A key witness was a man who lived next door and was awake from midnight to 4 a.m. on the night of the murder. He reported observing suspicious activity at John's house. Around 3 a.m., he saw John arrive with large bags. In the days that followed, John returned to the house frequently, working for hours and picking up heavy bags, which he then loaded into his car. The police suspected that the bags contained soil and construction debris, possibly related to the creation of a grave in the concrete floor. Interestingly, Sherry was wearing a ring that was identical to Noreen's missing ring. Collier could easily recall the ring his mother had worn, especially since there was a memorable story associated with the gift his mother had shared with him. This made him instantly recognize the ring on Sherry's hand. The police later learned that John had taken the ring from Noreen to give to his new partner, Sherry. Upon learning of this, Sherry was furious and immediately ended her relationship with John. The police then questioned John's mother, who had been with the children on the night of the incident. She claimed that she had not heard anything suspicious and vehemently denied any wrongdoing. Collier recalled an argument between his parents that he had heard before falling asleep. He was suddenly awakened by a terrifying scream and a loud bang on the wall, followed by silence. The police determined that John had inflicted a serious head injury on his wife. He then wrapped her head in a plastic bag, presumably to conceal any blood at the crime scene. John then went to check on his son, Collier. Collier vividly remembered his father standing in the doorway, staring at him. During this time, the boy pretended to be asleep, instinctively sensing danger. Collier now looks back on that moment with horror, wondering what his father might have done if he had realized that the boy was awake and had heard everything. Despite John's meticulous planning, he failed to create a credible story to explain his wife's disappearance. John cleaned the house thoroughly, leaving no forensic evidence of the crime. No traces of Noreen's DNA were found in the vehicle used to transport the body. Clearly, John was meticulous in his actions. When John struck his wife on the head, he avoided breaking the skin, resulting in no blood. He quickly covered her head with a bag, indicating intentionality. The pickup truck left no evidence, and not even the plastic bag covering her head left any fingerprints. Killers often leave traces on objects they forget to clean, but John was meticulous. He ensured that the entire crime scene was cleaned up after Noreen went missing. The police discovered circumstantial evidence. 2 days before his wife's death, John rented a drill, indicating that he was planning the murder. During the same period, he purchased cleaning supplies and quick-drying cement. John loaded his pickup truck with construction debris, waste, and soil, and drove to a location where he could dispose of it without restrictions. This decision turned out to be a serious mistake. When the police investigated and analyzed the debris, they confirmed that the concrete came from the basement of John's house. He had a motive to get rid of his troubled wife, Noreen, without going through a costly divorce. The investigation uncovered strong evidence against John, and Collier, who was only 12 years old, became a key witness. He understood that he would have to testify against his own father in court, which would greatly strengthen the prosecution's case. The prosecutor's office indicated that John could potentially face a prison sentence. For Collier, meanwhile, the situation posed difficult challenges. He struggled with the stigma of being known as the son of a murderer. Collier harbors resentment towards his father for taking away his mother through his terrible actions. John's defense team developed strategies to challenge the prosecution's case. They focused on undermining the prosecution's methods, arguing that many rules were ignored when interacting with child witnesses. Notably, no adults were present during many of the interviews, which the defense claimed was illegal. Furthermore, the defense believed that the police may have influenced the child to provide information that would incriminate his father in his mother's death, thus violating due process. John attempted to create a strong alibi to prove his innocence. He even convinced his brother to lie to the police, claiming that Noreen had called him. This made the investigation even more difficult for the police. The lie was exposed when it became clear that Noreen had died before that date. Despite this false testimony, John's brother did not face any charges. John's reputation as a successful chiropractor helped him maintain a positive image in the community. He was seen as a family man and a good father. He and Noreen had adopted a baby girl, and John was ready to have more children. At the time of the murder, Sherry Lee Campbell was pregnant and was able to prove that John was the father. Throughout the investigation, many questions arose about Sherry. Did she know about John's plan to kill his wife, or was she involved in the crime? These suspicions were fueled by her previous involvement in a real estate scam. A real estate broker reported seeing a young woman who looked like Sherry with Dr. John. However, the police found no evidence linking her to the crime or indicating that she knew about John's murderous intentions. She testified against him in court and cut off all contact with him afterward. Nevertheless, some people still believe that she may have had a role in the events that occurred. John's legal team presented their own arguments against the case. They identified errors in the autopsy report and even tried to argue that the body found in the basement was not Noreen's, but that of someone else who had been buried there earlier. However, the results of subsequent examinations confirmed that it was indeed Noreen's body, reinforcing the police's belief in John's guilt. As the jury deliberated, the atmosphere became tense. John Boyle Jr. was convicted of the premeditated murder of Noreen Boyle, and due to aggravating circumstances, was sentenced to life in prison without parole. His lawyers subsequently appealed several times. In 2010, John requested a review of his sentence and sought clemency. Initially, the request was denied, but it was later granted, allowing him the opportunity for early release after 20 years. John's defense team continued to fight for him even after his 2020 parole hearing. For nearly 30 years he had denied killing his wife, but he eventually changed his story. John admitted to Noreen's death, but it was clear that he had been dishonest. His real intention was to have his sentence reduced and go free. He showed little remorse, claiming that he had pushed his wife in a fit of rage, causing her to accidentally fall and hit her head, resulting in her death. He refused to discuss other actions that suggested he had planned the crime. As a result, his request for parole was denied, and he remained in prison. John's family shunned Collier, and Noreen's relatives were unable to adopt the boy because they were too old. He was adopted by a caring family in Canada. As he grew older, Collier changed his last name. He initially worked as a magazine model before becoming a successful cameraman in Los Angeles. He eventually teamed up with a renowned director and produced a documentary in 2018 that recounted the story of his mother, Noreen Boyle's death, as well as his fight for freedom and the horror of his father's crimes. While making the film, Collier visited his father in prison nearly 30 years after John was convicted of murder. During their meeting, John claimed that he had accidentally killed his wife during an argument when she lunged at him with a knife, and he instinctively pushed her away. Collier did not believe his father's story, but chose to forgive him. Despite this, John still harbored resentment toward Collier and did not consider him part of his family. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Laurel Mitchell. Laurel Jean Mitchell was born on May 24, 1958. She grew up in a loving and supportive environment with her two younger siblings, raised by their parents. The Mitchell family was very friendly, and many neighbors considered them the ideal American family. Despite the challenges they faced, the family remained close and worked together to overcome difficulties. From an early age, Laurel excelled in school and was part of a very religious family. She attended church regularly, with her parents and later with her siblings. Laurel was also creative and talented. She joined the local choir and practiced weekly. She achieved much success, performing with the choir in neighboring cities and participating in various community events. Committed to helping others, Laurel worked at a church camp near her home. Many of the attendees knew her well, having watched her grow up. Laurel was described as a friendly, positive girl, with a gentle yet strong personality. Those close to her believed that she had a bright future ahead, supported by her dedication to her family and community. On the morning of August 6, 1975, Laurel spent time caring for her younger brother and sister while waiting for their parents to return from work. In the afternoon, she was scheduled to go to church camp. Laurel left home around 2 p.m., said goodbye to everyone without incident, and arrived at camp on time, as usual. She was scheduled to work until around 10 p.m. that evening and then planned to go to a local park to relax with friends, which was half a mile from the church. After work, a friend of Laurel's offered to drive her to the park, but she declined, preferring to walk and enjoy the fresh air. About 10 minutes into her walk, she met some friends across the street who were having a good time. Although they waved goodbye, Laurel did not join them because she did not want to be late. That was the last time anyone saw her alive. Meanwhile, her friends were waiting for her at the park. After 20 minutes had passed without Laurel, they began to worry. It was unusual for her to be late, as she was known to be punctual and usually arrived early. Concerned, her friends decided to wait a little longer, thinking that she might simply be running late for church. They waited for her, but after half an hour, they grew impatient and felt a little annoyed by her tardiness. Unable to wait any longer, they decided to go out and have fun without her. Meanwhile, they worried that something might have happened to her. Laurel's family was not worried at first because she had told them that she was going to meet her friends after work and planned to return around midnight, which was her curfew. Her parents allowed her to go out, but as midnight approached and she still had not returned, they began to worry. Both her mother and father became concerned, as did her friends. They realized that Laurel's behavior was unusual. Worried about her well-being, her parents decided to take action instead of waiting. Her mother immediately began trying to find out what had happened to her daughter. Knowing that 17-year-old Laurel was very close to her friends, most of whom lived nearby, her parents decided to contact them despite the late hour, as their worries had grown too great. Laurel's best friend lived right across the street, and they often spent time together. So when Laurel wasn't at her friend's house, her parents were surprised. At that time, her friend had returned home, which raised their concerns. After talking to her friend, Laurel's parents were shocked to learn that she had not gone to the park to meet them and that they had gone for a walk without her. Her parents searched for Laurel along the path she would have taken, but found no sign of her. They planned to go home, hoping that she would be back by then, but she did not return. Worried, the family began calling everyone they knew who might have seen Laurel. Despite the late hour, most people were sympathetic, but unfortunately, no one knew where she was. They eventually decided to call the police to report her missing. Sadly, the police responded with the usual excuses, saying that since Laurel was 17 and was supposed to be with friends, she may have run away due to a conflict with her parents or simply been with someone else. They speculated that she might have had too much to drink and was unable to return home. However, her parents insisted that this behavior was completely out of character for Laurel. Laurel spent most of her time at home and at church, but the police did not listen to their concerns. Determined to find Laurel, her parents and others spent nearly an hour at the police station trying to convince the officers that she would never have missed a meeting with friends or broken curfew. Eventually, the police seemed to take action. By this time, a large group of townspeople were anxious to know what had happened to Laurel. Everyone in the community knew each other, and the idea that a young girl could be in danger in such a quiet town, where nothing like this had ever happened, was shocking. Laurel's parents made a phone call, and a crowd gathered outside the police station, ready to help. Despite the late hour, the people were determined to search for Laurel along with the police. First, they checked the camp near the church, along the route Laurel had taken. However, they found no sign of her along the entire path she might have followed. Then the group split up and searched the city until dawn, but unfortunately, they still found no clues. By 10:30 a.m., the search of the homes of Laurel's friends, whom she was supposed to meet, was nearly complete. The hope that she had simply gone out to have fun had evaporated. Naturally, there was interest in the missing girl's relatives. The Mitchell family had made extensive efforts to identify any potential suspects in Laurel's vicinity. However, they ruled them out, one by one. Laurel had a good social circle, with no signs of cruelty or criminality. Her friends could provide no leads for the investigation. There were no suspicious boyfriends or manipulative individuals in her life, as she had never dated anyone or even thought about boys. There were no jealous suitors who could harm her. Rumors began to spread, and the local community started to pressure the police for answers. Eventually, the police learned that Laurel had met a group of friends about 10 minutes earlier and had passed by them. They reported that they had seen nothing unusual. Laurel seemed happy and was not being followed. So what could have happened to her? A few kilometers north of the city, a man was fishing with his son on the river. Everything seemed calm until he noticed something suspicious floating downstream. Out of curiosity, he decided to row his boat closer. To his horror, he discovered that it was the body of a girl. The man was terrified, thinking that she might have had an accident and drowned. He believed he could still save her, so he pulled her body into the boat and tried to help. However, he soon realized that she was too cold, despite the warm weather. When all his efforts failed, he brought her body to shore with his son. He spotted a passing car and asked the driver to call for help. At the time, Laurel Mitchell's disappearance had not yet been officially reported. Since she had no identification, it was difficult to identify her. The police responded to the call. It turned out that the man and his son were not from the area and did not know Laurel. The police noticed a ring with her initials engraved on her finger. A few hours later, Laurel was officially reported missing, and her initials confirmed her identity. Her parents were able to identify her immediately. Initially, there was an assumption that she may have accidentally fallen off the bridge, slipped, and drowned, possibly due to not knowing how to swim or being intoxicated. However, her parents quickly dismissed these thoughts. They knew that swimming was a regular part of Laurel's training. She had always loved water and enjoyed swimming since childhood, so she could have swum out of the reservoir if she had accidentally fallen in. Additionally, her family and friends confirmed that she had not been drinking. She had not intended to cross the bridge that night, as it was not on her route, making it unlikely that she had accidentally ended up there. Despite this, the police remained skeptical of the family's beliefs. Laurel was found in a large river with a strong current. In some areas, the current is so powerful that even professional swimmers avoid it. According to the police, Laurel may have fallen into the water or gone swimming and become a victim of the current. She may have been swept away and been unable to handle the situation. This theory is supported by the existence of areas marked as too dangerous to swim. Forensic experts were quick to dismiss the police's explanation. Laurel had numerous bruises indicating that she had been beaten, an apparent case of violent death. Many of her injuries appeared to be defensive wounds, particularly on her arms and upper chest. Her face and head were severely injured, suggesting that she had been struck with a blunt object. The cause of death was determined to be blunt force trauma, indicating an attempt to conceal the evidence by dumping her body in the river. The body had been submerged in water for a long time, causing most of the evidence to wash away. The remaining traces could not be thoroughly analyzed because DNA testing was still in its early stages, which caused the investigation to stall. Although the police had some evidence in the form of suspicious biological traces, they were too small to be of any use. All of the items recovered, such as Laurel's clothes, shoes, and underwear that showed these traces, were eventually stored. At the funeral, the church was so crowded that many attendees had to stand outside. People expressed their condolences to Laurel's family and hoped that the case would be solved soon. The investigation soon stalled and only made progress a few months later when an anonymous witness called the police from a public phone. She claimed to know what had happened to Laurel, but when the police began asking questions, she abruptly hung up and was never found again. The police made a public appeal to find the girl who had called them. They assured her that her identity would be kept confidential and that she would be safe, providing any protection she might need. They urged her to contact them again and share any information she had. To encourage her, they even offered a reward of $50,000, a substantial sum at the time. Despite this, the girl did not call back. Unfortunately, the reward led to trouble, as the police received some false information, wasting resources on unnecessary investigations. 6 months after Laurel's death, a woman contacted the police. She lived across the street from where Laurel had walked to the park that evening. She reported seeing Laurel at 10:15 p.m., the same time she was returning from work. While she was at home, she heard a strange noise outside. It sounded like a car had stopped suddenly in front of her house, followed by the screams of young people. When she looked out the window, she saw one of the trunks slam shut. Laurel, who had disappeared from view for a moment, was seen by a housewife. The housewife noticed a red car with strange young men inside, who quickly drove away. Although she could not see the faces or the license plate, she provided a description of the car. It was a bright red car, quite recognizable at the time. The police were very interested in this information and began investigating all the car owners matching that description. However, for a month, they found no clues, much to the frustration of the police and Laurel's family. The investigation hit a dead end again. Decades later, in the early 2010s, advances in technology and methods, including genetic analysis, allowed for a more thorough examination of the available evidence. Profiling techniques were also used, leading to the creation of a psychological profile of the suspect. FBI agents were even brought in to assist. The profiler suggested that the suspect was likely a young man who lived in or near the area, had a history of violent crime, and possibly a criminal record. Despite these efforts, the investigation into Laurel's case made little progress. The DNA samples from the evidence were too limited to be analyzed comprehensively, hampering the police's efforts to solve the crime. During this time, a team was formed to tackle unsolved cases. Finally, the case of Laurel Mitchell came to the attention of her elderly parents. They once again expressed their desire to confront the brutal criminal who had beaten their innocent daughter to death. The police chose to restart the investigation, ignoring all the controversial conclusions from over 30 years ago. Sadly, Laurel's parents died before the police could answer their long-standing questions. As of 2012, the culprit remains unidentified. After the tragedy, Laurel's brother and sister were determined to continue their fight for justice. They believed that the media could help promote their efforts, so they issued several news reports about the investigation, which had been ongoing for nearly 4 years. A few months into their media campaign, they began to see progress with the police. A woman who had lived in the area in 1975 and was the same age as Laurel came forward to share her story. About a week after Laurel's murder, she had met a man named John Wayne Lehman at a party, and they had begun a long-term relationship. At another party, John confessed to her about a traumatic incident that had occurred that summer. He revealed that he had witnessed his friend attacking a girl on the street and felt helpless because he could not intervene. John gave a detailed account of the crime, but maintained that he did not kill Laurel. Instead, he claimed that it was his friend. At the time, she did not believe him. When she went to the police station and repeated what John had said, the police became interested. The information she provided about the attack and murder included details that had not been reported in the media, raising suspicions. Despite this, the investigation remained challenging. The woman mentioned that she had broken up with John shortly after his confession and that she did not know about his current situation. He was not listed in the police database, indicating that he had no legal problems. The police sought to identify John's friend. The woman struggled to remember her friend's name. To help her recall, the police provided her with a list of former suspects and potential witnesses in the case. She recognized the name Fred Bandy Jr. 2 years after Laurel's death, a young man came to the police station, stating that he had met Fred, who had no stable home, job, or education. He described Fred as having an anger problem that he could not control. During one of their meetings, Fred confided in him that a friend named John had attacked a girl on the street for no reason. When the girl fought back, Fred became angry and started hitting her. He continued to attack her even after she passed out and fell to the ground. Fred claimed that he lost control at that point, which ultimately led to the girl's death. To cover up their crime, they dumped the girl's body in the river. At the time, the police did not take the young man's testimony seriously because he could not provide the girl's name, making it impossible to verify his account. Initially, the police ignored the situation, but eventually remembered it. However, they did not take action because they could not verify his testimony. After reviewing the report, the police discovered that John Wayne Lehman and Fred Bandy Jr. were involved in the case. Now, the police decided to take a closer look at the main suspects. However, at this time, they still had no information about John or Fred. Finally, the police had advanced technology that could analyze even the smallest traces. In 2019, they decided to test all the evidence collected from Laurel's murder, including her clothes, shoes, underwear, and a ring. Contrary to expectations, the testing process took nearly a year, even with these improved methods. In February 2020, a major breakthrough occurred when forensic scientists discovered microscopic traces on Laurel's clothing that had gone unnoticed for decades. The authorities had enough samples from Fred, who had a history of violent crimes, and his DNA was stored in a database. They needed time to compare these samples. Unfortunately, the initial results only showed an 80% match, which was not conclusive enough, so the investigation continued. After conducting further analysis using different methods, they achieved a near 100% match with Fred's samples. Finally, in 2023, the decision was made to arrest Fred Bandy Jr. and his friend John Wayne Lehman. Police noted that Fred had a history of 3 violent crimes, all targeting young girls, but he had only been convicted of one of these crimes. Fred served a short sentence and was released. He has now admitted to attacking Laurel Mitchell and mentioned that his friend John owned a red car in 1975. He tried to blame John but could not explain why only his DNA was found on Laurel's body. Both men were arrested nearly 48 years after Laurel's murder. Laurel's younger brother and sister struggled to understand how the killers were able to live freely while the police failed to catch them all these years. It was expected that they would accuse each other. Fred blamed John for everything, while John insisted that Fred was responsible for abusing and killing Laurel and drowning her. He denied any involvement in the murder, claiming that his fear of Fred had prevented him from intervening or speaking up until now. After hearing arguments from both sides, the jury reached a decision. Within an hour, they found Fred Bandy Jr. guilty of first-degree murder. At the time, Fred was 69 years old. At the sentencing hearing that followed, he was sentenced to life in prison without parole. It is important to note that Fred was tried under a 1975 law. At that time, he could have faced life in prison with the possibility of parole or the death penalty. However, the death penalty has since been abolished in that state. As a result, Fred will spend the rest of his life in prison. John Wayne Lehman, who was 68 years old when he was arrested in Indiana, negotiated a deal with the prosecution by pleading guilty to conspiracy to commit murder. Because of his cooperation, John was sentenced to only 8 years in prison, with the possibility of parole. In exchange for this leniency, John had to testify for the prosecution during the trial. After the murderers were convicted, Laurel's 62-year-old younger sister released balloons into the sky that read, "We got him." This allowed the family to celebrate a long-overdue victory for justice. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Dustin Duthie. Dustin Duthie grew up in a large family, with both biological and half-siblings from his mother's and stepfather's previous marriages. His mother, Shawn Boshuk, separated from his biological father when Dustin was 3 years old. Despite this, his stepfather, Alan Penny Legion, became a loving and supportive father figure. Dustin was especially close to his younger half-brother, Adam. From a young age, Dustin was recognized as being very intelligent, and his family had high expectations for his future. They believed he would achieve great things. However, as Dustin grew older, he often argued and fought with his relatives, and these conflicts frequently escalated from verbal disagreements to physical altercations. Although his family tried to help him manage his anger, it became clear that Dustin struggled to control his emotions. His arguments became increasingly violent, and he began throwing objects at others as a way to release his frustration. Over time, his parents began to tolerate his behavior and often gave in to his demands to avoid further conflict. This approach allowed Dustin to manipulate his family, especially his mother, Shawn, who frequently gave in to him. His manipulative and violent tendencies continued throughout his teenage years. Dustin's behavior eventually led to legal trouble. At the age of 16, he was arrested for the first time after breaking into his school with friends. Together, they vandalized the vice principal's office, smashed a vending machine with a stolen golf club, and stole various items. Despite this incident, Dustin showed no signs of changing his behavior. As Dustin grew older, he became a burden to his family, causing pain and frustration for his parents. His rude and aggressive behavior did not improve with age. In an attempt to control his anger, Dustin took boxing classes, but this effort proved unsuccessful. Adam experienced this firsthand during a training session when Dustin's aggression led to illegal strikes that violated the rules of boxing. Fortunately, the coach intervened before Dustin could harm his younger brother. That day, Adam truly understood how dangerous his brother was. The only person who could stand up to Dustin was their stepfather, Alan, which caused tension between the two. During his teenage years, Dustin had many friends and even a few girlfriends. As both Adam and Dustin entered adulthood, They actively pursued relationships. During this time, Adam met and fell in love with a girl named Taylor Toller. However, tensions arose when Adam noticed Taylor growing closer to Dustin, leading to a minor conflict between the two brothers. Adam found out that Taylor and Dustin were dating. Although he felt sad about it, he chose to accept and support their relationship. When Taylor began dating Dustin, she was 20 years old. Taylor, the only daughter in her family, had grown up happily, surrounded by loved ones and many friends. After graduating from high school, Taylor's gentle and kind nature led her to feel drawn to working with children. In contrast, Dustin was very different from Taylor. He often communicated in a rough and abrasive manner, even with her. Their relationship was frequently tense and filled with conflict. Taylor and Dustin's friends noticed that the couple constantly argued. Despite this, Taylor did not leave Dustin. Perhaps she believed he would eventually change or that she could help him improve. Their complicated relationship dragged on for years, but Dustin's inability to control his anger only made things worse. The situation became even more strained due to frequent arguments with Dustin's family. These conflicts escalated to the point where Dustin physically assaulted his younger brother, Adam, and his stepfather, Alan. Boxing played a significant role in shaping Dustin's behavior. Whenever he felt angry, frustrated, or dissatisfied, he would hit the gym and train harder. It was during this time that Dustin began using steroids. Steroids are widely known to cause side effects such as anger, irritability, and aggressive behavior. Dustin's friends and family repeatedly urged him to stop using the drugs and even suggested that he seek professional help, but he ignored their advice. In the weeks and months that followed, his anger issues worsened. At one point, Dustin attempted to attack his stepfather, Alan, with a metal bar. At family dinners, threats and yelling became commonplace. One evening, however, Dustin's behavior became so unbearable that he was asked to leave. He stood up, walked toward the door, but before leaving, he turned back to his family and said, "You will get what you deserve," before storming out. The family had grown accustomed to Dustin's behavior. These behaviors had become a regular part of their lives. At the time, no one truly believed he would act on any of his threats. However, years of unchecked behavior and lack of intervention were about to take their toll. Everything would come to a head in the summer of 2018. On the morning of Tuesday, July 31, 2018, Adam began his day as usual with a cup of coffee. While sipping his coffee, he realized he hadn't heard from his brother Dustin or the rest of the family in days. Feeling concerned, Adam tried calling Dustin, but his calls went straight to voicemail. He continued trying to reach his brother, but all attempts were unsuccessful. Before he could dwell on it further, Adam received a surprise call from the police. They asked to meet him at his home to discuss an urgent matter. When Adam pressed for details, the officer explained that it was not something they could discuss over the phone. When the police arrived, they shared news that would change Adam's life forever. They informed him about a phone call Dustin had made to the police. During the call, Dustin confessed to killing his girlfriend a week earlier, as well as his stepfather and mother. According to the police, Dustin had been sitting downstairs with a knife and a bottle of whiskey, unable to bring himself to go upstairs and face what he had done. The police rushed to Taylor's home in Elmwood Park, where they discovered her body. Dustin was arrested shortly after making the call and did not resist arrest. Forensic evidence and Dustin's confession revealed that Taylor had been killed 5 days before Dustin murdered his parents. Taylor's body was found in her bed. According to Dustin, the two had argued and fought throughout the night. At around 3 a.m., he strangled her. However, the actual cause of death was determined to be a deep cut to her throat. After her death, Dustin pulled the covers up to her chin. 2 hours later, at around 5 a.m., Dustin left Taylor's apartment and returned to his parents' house, trying to suppress the memory of what he had done. Incredibly, he attempted to act as if nothing had happened for the next few days. The situation changed when Taylor's parents called Dustin's parents. Taylor had been the one in regular contact with her family, so her sudden silence raised concerns. The call alarmed Dustin's parents, who had known Taylor for over 5 years. During this time, Dustin's parents repeatedly tried to get him to talk, suspecting that he might know something about Taylor's disappearance. Despite their persistence, Dustin insisted that he knew nothing. Dustin claimed that he had spoken to Taylor 3 days before her disappearance, but maintained that he had no idea what might have happened to her. However, his parents seemed to believe he was hiding something, and their constant questioning made Dustin realize that the truth would soon come out. Feeling desperate, he concluded that the only way to keep Taylor's disappearance a secret was to make his parents disappear as well. While contemplating how to carry out his plan, Dustin was in the kitchen with his mother, who was sitting at the table sorting some papers. At that moment, he once again lost control of his actions. According to the police report, Dustin's mother, Shawn, had been attacked with a knife, and her body was dragged across the kitchen floor in an attempt to hide it. His stepfather, Alan, was also murdered by Dustin, suffering multiple stab wounds. Both bodies were placed under a plastic tarp, and the surrounding area was hastily cleaned. During the investigation, police discovered a pile of hair in the bathroom. They later determined that Dustin had shaved his head to alter his appearance, possibly in an attempt to escape and hide. However, he ultimately failed to follow through with this plan. After killing his parents, Dustin drove to Taylor's apartment, but was unable to get inside because he had lost the remote control key. Frustrated, he drank whiskey, smoked cigarettes, and pondered his next move. With nowhere to go, no way to dispose of the body, and no plan to cover his tracks, Dustin decided to call 911. Initially, he was incoherent, appearing confused and uncertain about his actions. The experienced police officers kept him talking instead of ending the call, encouraging him to share more details. Dustin eventually confessed to killing his parents earlier that day. The police redirected the conversation, asking about his condition, whether he had been drinking, and whether he had a weapon. They stayed on the line, urging him to surrender peacefully and without resistance. Meanwhile, officers were dispatched to arrest him. Although the investigation appeared straightforward, it took police more than 2 years to gather and analyze all the evidence needed to present the case in court. It was determined that Taylor had been killed in the early morning hours of July 26, 2018. Surveillance camera footage showed Dustin and Taylor entering and leaving the apartment at different times, sometimes holding hands. The evening before the murder, Taylor was seen returning to the apartment alone, visibly upset and crying. The couple was later seen having an emotional discussion. At 5:15 a.m., Dustin was seen leaving the apartment alone, carrying a large box. He then removed the box and a black bag from his car. Inside the box is Taylor's towel. After Dustin was arrested, he was taken to a local hospital for observation because he appeared to be mentally unstable. After undergoing evaluations, he was determined to be mentally competent to stand trial. A key piece of evidence was later discovered by Dustin's younger brother in the back seat of Alan's car. It was a letter torn into small pieces, crumpled, and wrapped in duct tape. Experts painstakingly reconstructed the letter, which turned out to be Dustin's confession. In it, he described his thoughts and feelings after killing Taylor, admitting that he had always been curious about what it felt like to kill someone and to feel someone's soul leave their body. How this letter ended up in his stepfather's car remains a mystery, but it played an important role in building Dustin's psychological profile. A psychological evaluation determined that Dustin was suffering from a mental disorder at the time of the crimes. However, the disorder was caused by his use of illegal drugs and steroids, which impaired his ability to understand the nature, consequences, and illegality of his actions. The findings, evidence, and confessions of Dustin built a strong case against him. 3 years after the murders of Taylor Toller, Shawn Boshuk, and Alan Penny Legion, Dustin Duthie's trial began. However, just 3 days before the trial, Dustin pleaded guilty to all 3 counts, bringing the case to a close. Dustin Duthie was convicted of second-degree murder for the deaths of his mother, Taylor, and Sean, as well as first-degree murder for the murder of his stepfather, Alan. During the trial, several people testified, including Dustin's grandmother and siblings, who shared the pain of losing their mother and stepfather. Many others present in court spoke in support of Taylor. Taylor's mother emotionally stated that their family had been a close-knit one, and now they live with nightmares and trauma. They will never forgive Dustin for taking their daughter's life. Dustin was also given the opportunity to speak. He said that he would not ask for forgiveness because he knew what he had done was unforgivable. If he could sacrifice his life to bring back those 3 beautiful souls, he would do it. The prosecution emphasized that Dustin killed his mother and stepfather while sober. By law, Dustin was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 35 years. The sentence includes 25 years for the murders of his stepfather, Alan, and his mother, Sean, as well as an additional 10 years for the murder of his girlfriend, Taylor. While the loss is irreparable, the family feels that justice has been served and that Dustin will face the consequences of his actions. The deaths of Sean and Alan have had a profound impact on their children. One of their sons, Adam, has said that the loss of his parents shattered his dream of pursuing a football career. Another son has expressed his grief over Dustin's actions. Sean and Alan were loving, supportive parents who gave Dustin many opportunities to turn his life around and stood by him and their other children. It is a great tragedy that such a betrayal came from their own son. Although Dustin has apologized and could be eligible for parole after 35 years, many believe he should stay behind bars for life. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another horrible case. The case of Rachel Maidens. Rachel Maidens and Randy live in a large mansion. The 600-acre estate is located in one of the most affluent and respected areas of the city. Their home is like a fortress, providing a safe environment for both family life and business. Rachel Maidens, a successful orthodontist, owns a private practice in the city's downtown area. She is known for her beauty, being a natural blonde, and is a devoted mother to her daughter Natalie, who attends a private Catholic school. After completing her undergraduate degree, Rachel went on to dental school in Florida. Throughout her studies, she received numerous accolades for her accomplishments, including a prestigious scholarship. She completed her residency at Children's National Medical Center in Washington, D.C., marking the culmination of her education. Despite her young age, Rachel's thriving career has allowed her to establish her own practice, publish articles in peer-reviewed journals, and speak regularly at conferences. Not everything in Rachel's life has been a success. During her college years, her father was arrested for selling illegal banned substance. Despite being a respected pharmacist, he became involved in the sale of prescription drugs. Faced with the shame of his arrest, and before an investigation could be launched, he tragically chose to take his own life just 2 days later. The family's ordeal did not end there. The police continued their investigation, which resulted in the freezing of bank accounts belonging to Rachel, her mother, and her brother. This investigation dragged on for years, culminating in Rachel's mother being ordered to pay a $15,000 fine, marking a dark period in Rachel's life. Many friends and family members noted that these events had a significant negative impact on her emotional health. Despite these challenges, Rachel did not let them stop her from pursuing career success. She faced these difficulties with resilience, continuing to strive for personal and professional growth. Determined to excel in her field, Rachel overcame her family's financial crisis, dealt with the tragic loss of her father, and ultimately regained control of her life. Her husband, Randy Maidens, grew up in Georgia. After completing his education, he attended Georgia Tech and eventually became a well-paid pharmaceutical sales manager. However, he lost his job. Randy began struggling with alcoholism, and Rachel suspected that he was also using various illegal substances, which made the situation worse. During this time, multiple witnesses saw Randy enter a restaurant in an intoxicated state, disturbing both customers and employees. One employee felt the need to call 911. The employee recognized him as Randy Maidens, as he frequently visited the restaurant with his wife. Minutes after the first call, she called 911 again to express her growing concern. She mentioned that Randy had accidentally dropped several disturbing items from his pocket, including a shotgun shell casing and a large bottle that looked like a painkiller, such as Tylenol, prompting the police to rush to the scene. Randy attempted to leave the restaurant, but the staff convinced him to stay. When the police arrived, they noticed that he was acting strangely, although they could not determine whether he was simply drunk or under the influence of something stronger. Randy appeared concerned and tried to explain that his wife needed him to go home. When the restaurant staff offered to call his wife, he refused to provide her phone number. He then attempted to get into his car, but the police stopped him. They searched his vehicle and discovered a handgun in the back seat. Despite the unusual circumstances, he was not arrested. Several witnesses noted that someone had helped him into his car that night, preventing him from driving while intoxicated. On the evening of April 21, 2013, Elizabeth Frisbee, Rachel's mother, called the Brentwood Police Department, asking them to check on her daughter's home. Elizabeth had been trying to contact Rachel for a long time, but when she called, Randy answered and refused to let her speak to her daughter. Frustrated, the mother threatened to call the police. The police quickly arrived at Rachel's house and found that all the blinds were drawn, making it impossible to see inside. No one answered when they knocked, but they discovered the garage door open, allowing them to enter the house. They called for Rachel and Randy, but neither was present. They were surprised to hear screams coming from the second floor. A 2-year-old girl named Natalie was crying there. While checking the second floor, a police officer entered the hallway leading to the master bedroom. The scene was tragic. Rachel had been murdered. Randy quickly became the prime suspect and was placed on the search list. To prevent him from escaping, helicopters and special forces were dispatched to the area. The upscale neighborhood resembled a scene from a Hollywood movie as the police teamed up with Rachel's neighbors to track down Randy. Police informed Rachel's relatives, who picked up her daughter, Natalie. Randy was considered particularly dangerous due to his recent erratic behavior, and it was believed he was still armed, which led to heightened alerts. Neighbors reported witnessing him behaving inappropriately on several occasions. A note was found on the kitchen table. In it, Randy sincerely apologized to his daughter and expressed his deep love for her. He mentioned that he had to run away because of a terrible act he had committed, although he did not explain what that act was. Randy expressed his gratitude to his wife's relatives for the years they had shared. He revealed that he could no longer bear the daily humiliation he faced from his wife. For 6 years, he had felt emotionally tormented every evening. That night, his wife began to provoke him again, pushing him over the edge. Randy, a loving father, wanted to protect his daughter, Natalie. He also stated that he wished to give custody to Rachel's relatives. When the police examined the note, Randy was still missing. Some experts believed the letter could be both a confession and a final goodbye, complicating the search by raising the possibility that he may have died. Interestingly, a car belonging to Randy was found in the private driveway of the mansion. Inside the trunk, police discovered $87,000 in cash packed in a large bag. Additionally, about $10,000 more was uncovered through phone records. Police learned that on the night of the murder, Randy had called his lawyer. It seems his original plan was to kill his wife and escape with the money to start over. However, something went wrong. Why didn't he take his car? What stopped him? Police began to suspect that this might have been related to calls from Rachel's mother, Elizabeth. She contacted the police, which could have thwarted Randy's plans. The police were surprised that the search for Randy did not last long. Just 12 hours after it began, he walked out of the woods behind his house with his hands up and surrendered to the police without a fight. He immediately blamed his wife and the pressure he felt from her behavior. He defended himself by stating that he was Rachel's third husband, as the previous two could not tolerate her constant nagging. However, this did not excuse the 10 shots he fired into her back. Following his wife's murder, it was discovered that he had recently faced several legal issues due to minor offenses. A few months before the tragic incident, Randy was stopped by the police for driving under the influence, but he refused to take a breathalyzer test. By law, this refusal is considered an admission of drunk driving. He subsequently caused a drunk driving accident, crashing into a substation and cutting off power to nearly 200 homes for hours. In the weeks before Rachel was murdered, a neighbor spotted a man wearing a ski mask running through the woods with 2 dogs, near the area where Randy later surrendered to the police. When the neighbor approached the man, she recognized him as Randy. After speaking to him, she quickly realized he appeared to be very intoxicated or possibly under the influence of banned substance. Randy claimed he was walking his dog and got lost. The neighbor noticed he had something like a bow and arrow in his backpack, which made her feel unsafe, so she left. Randy had been seen engaging in similar behavior on several occasions, causing concern among residents, particularly those living near Randy's family, who feared for their safety. In January 2013, at a work conference in Orlando, which he attended with Rachel, Randy went to a bar one evening and became intoxicated. When the staff asked him to leave, he responded by smashing dishes and swearing. Several witnesses reported hearing him threaten to kill his wife during this outburst. Several customers tried to help by escorting him out, but he started fighting again, prompting them to call the police. He was eventually arrested for disorderly conduct and public intoxication, but was released the following day. The pharmaceutical company he worked for was very concerned about its reputation after this incident. One of his co-workers, who wished to remain anonymous, suggested that he take a medical leave of absence, but Randy ignored the advice and returned to work after 3 days. As a result, he was fired. During the investigation, the police worked extensively with Randy's colleagues. According to them, Randy's behavior began to change dramatically a few months before Rachel was murdered. Although he never explained the reason for this change, he often complained about his wife and blamed her for his problems. However, those around him found it hard to believe that his wife could push him to such extremes, as Rachel always appeared sweet and calm. At the time of the murder, Randy's ex-girlfriend was trying to reconnect with him. They had dated in high school, but had drifted apart over time. Now divorced and reminiscing about their past, she wanted to rekindle their relationship as adults. She was aware of the family problems Randy was facing and believed that his situation would eventually lead to divorce. Randy's ex-girlfriend was surprised by the recent events in his life and felt she could help him get back on track. Having known him for over 10 years, they had maintained a friendship throughout that time. She saw Randy as a caring and intelligent man who valued his family and loved his daughter. However, she also knew about the more troubled aspects of his life. She was aware that he had endured a difficult childhood, living with an alcoholic father who abused him, and had a strained relationship with his mother. These circumstances contributed to his reluctance to leave his daughter Natalie in the care of relatives. Randy's ex-girlfriend suspected that his marital problems and challenging childhood had affected him, leading to his need for support. Co-workers at the company where Randy worked noted that they had known about his struggles with substance abuse long before the incident. Both co-workers and management reported that he openly acknowledged his struggle with addiction. Although he was believed to have overcome these challenges in the years leading up to the attack, he eventually relapsed. What caused Randy's shocking behavior that led to his wife's murder? Shortly after his arrest, Randy was charged with first-degree murder. He also faced charges of endangering the life of a child. Additionally, he was charged with tampering with evidence for attempting to remove bloodstains and hide the blanket he used. Police believe he was attempting to destroy evidence of the crime and intended to flee. Randy was initially released on a $25 million bail while awaiting trial. His attorney sought to have his bail lowered and to ensure he was released on house arrest, arguing that Randy was a victim of his wife's control. The attorney pointed out that although a significant amount of cash was found in Randy's car, there was no evidence, such as documents or cards, indicating that he was planning to leave the city. The defense claimed that Randy had multiple opportunities to escape, but chose not to. However, the prosecutor's office disagreed. They had a witness who initially claimed to have heard Randy discuss plans to flee to Mexico, but this testimony was later proven false. Meanwhile, Rachel's mother filed a civil lawsuit against Randy to block him from accessing joint accounts and assets with his wife. She feared that Randy might evade justice by bribing officials with family assets. Despite the challenges, the situation eventually turned in Randy's favor. The attorney successfully negotiated a significant reduction in bail to $750,000, which Randy promptly paid. He would remain free for at least another year and a half while he awaited further hearings, with a trial set for September 2014. Surprisingly, the judge allowed him to continue living in the house where Rachel was murdered. However, this arrangement came with complications. He had to comply with bail conditions that required him to notify the police at least 24 hours before entering the house. Additionally, he was required to have an attorney with him at all times and wear a GPS tracking bracelet on his ankle. He was also prohibited from contacting his daughter and Rachel's family. Meanwhile, Rachel's mother continued her legal battle while awaiting a decision on her civil lawsuit. She eventually obtained a court order freezing the couple's assets. Despite this, Randy entered the home and took her belongings, leading to a new charge of contempt of court. However, thanks to the efforts of his attorney, the charge was dismissed. During the investigation, it was discovered that Randy had not simply fled into the woods after the murder. Several neighbors reported that the morning after the incident, they found evidence of attempts to break into their homes through both the garage door and the front door. Police reviewed surveillance video from a nearby club and confirmed that Randy was the one trying to approach the neighbors. He posed a significant threat, but he denied the allegations. Over time, the situation was de-escalated. Judges who allowed Randy, who was clearly out of control, to remain free for a year and a half faced criticism. During this time, he lived in an apartment complex in Bellevue, a suburb of Nashville. A resident reported an incident involving Randy, who attempted to enter the building by knocking on the door and pretending to be a police officer. The resident refused to open the door but heard Randy attempting to enter other apartments. Concerned, he called the police. When they arrived, they found Randy extremely intoxicated. The next day, the judge revoked his bail. Incredibly, Randy's erratic and intoxicated behavior continued both before and after the murder of his wife. The fear that Randy's neighbors felt over the past year, especially when they learned that he had been released on bail and would be living next door to them in his family's mansion, was palpable. It seemed as though justice would soon be served, as his crimes were punishable by death under Tennessee law. However, his skilled defense attorney had a strategic plan. On September 29, 2014, Randy reached a plea deal with the prosecution, pleading guilty to second-degree murder and child neglect. As a result, he was sentenced to just 25 years in prison, less than half of the maximum sentence of 60 years for those charges. In addition, his attorney managed to secure the possibility of parole, which could be granted if he demonstrated good behavior in prison. Since Randy was 42 at the time of his sentencing, he was likely to be released around the age of 60. During the trial, Randy Maidens expressed his remorse to Rachel's family, stating that he had promised to love and cherish everyone, but had betrayed that promise. He felt he would have to live with this pain forever. and he believed there was no prison worse than the one he had brought upon himself. Randy also sincerely apologized to all of Rachel's family and friends for the pain and suffering he had caused them. Rachel's mother felt deeply offended by the court's decision. She appealed to the High Court several times to review the sentence and impose a harsher penalty, but her efforts were unsuccessful. Rachel's family was shocked by the decisions made during the investigation and trial. Her mother and brother spoke out in the media to express their displeasure, emphasizing their sadness over Rachel's tragic and brutal death as a beautiful, successful woman. They protested the seemingly unreasonable decisions of the justice system, which appeared to favor the criminal. Randy had never been charged with contempt of court, tampering with evidence, or previous offenses such as drunk driving. In response to the family's statements, Randy's attorney expressed his client's sincere regret and condolences. However, Rachel's mother felt that these words were insincere and did not comfort her or bring Rachel back. Their daughter, Natalie, will inherit her parents' fortune when she comes of age. Hello everyone, today we will learn about another case, the case of Maribel Ramos. California is one of the most prominent states in the United States, known for its warm climate, beautiful beaches, and world-class entertainment industry. Many come to California with hopes of building a better life. However, not everyone achieves their dreams. For some, California can be a land of promise, but for others, it presents harsh challenges. Maribel Ramos had a long-term goal of entering law enforcement. However, she needed to obtain a higher education, and to afford that, she joined the military. Maribel served 2 combat tours in Iraq and planned to graduate from California State University, Fullerton, with a degree in criminal justice. A veteran of the U.S. Army, she had served for 8 years and was looking forward to returning to civilian life. Maribel knew her goals and was determined to achieve them. After her military service, she shifted her focus to new opportunities, including her desire to enroll at a university in California, Orange, California, where she lived until her mother's passing in 2009. Then, Maribel reached out to her sister, Lucy, asking if she could move in with her. Lucy declined, explaining that she and her daughter were settled in a different location, but she would consider moving in with Maribel if she was unable to find a roommate. To find a roommate, Maribel placed an advertisement and soon received several responses. One inquiry stood out, a man named Kwang Choi Joy, who described himself as seeking a place to stay while job hunting. After meeting Kwang, both Maribel and Lucy found him to be calm and educated. He mentioned to the sisters that he had never been married and had no children. After Kwang moved in with Maribel, it quickly became evident that he was quite isolated. He spent a lot of time alone at home and rarely ventured outside. To help him connect, Maribel started inviting Kwang to family gatherings, dinners, games, and parties, where he met many of her relatives. Over time, Maribel began to change her routine and started participating in a weekly softball game, which was unusual for her. On May 2013, she disappeared when she failed to show up for a scheduled event. Maribel's family and friends made several attempts to reach her, but none were successful. They checked her apartment but found no sign of her. Concerned, they reported her missing, prompting the authorities to launch an investigation. Police officers visited Maribel's apartment but received no response after knocking on the door. Everything outside seemed normal, with no signs of trouble. There were no broken windows or indications of a break-in. As a result, the officers decided to enter the apartment to search for Maribel. There were no indications of a crime at Maribel's home. A search revealed that she was not packing for a trip. All her clothes were neatly in place, except for her mobile phone, wallet, and identification. Since Maribel's car was parked outside, investigators had their suspicions. Maribel was not the kind of person to vanish without a trace, which raised concerns that she might be in danger. When investigators arrived, Kwang Choi Joy unexpectedly approached them. He mentioned that he had last seen Maribel the previous night around 10 p.m. when he returned from a walk. In the video from the surveillance camera that evening at 8:15 p.m., Maribel had received a check for her apartment, which was the last time she was seen in public. She calmly accepted the envelope and left, showing no signs of fear or urgency. At that time, Maribel's family turned to social media for assistance. They shared a photo of Maribel online, asking anyone with information about her to reach out. They aimed to engage as many people as possible in the search. Meanwhile, investigators attempted to track Maribel's mobile phone, but it had been turned off. During their investigation, the police learned that Maribel had recently started dating a man named Paul Lopez. He was the last person to speak with her on the phone the day before she went missing. As a result, the police asked Paul to come to the station for questioning. Paul appeared confident and explained that he and Maribel were still in the early stages of their relationship. He also mentioned that he was dating other women. When asked if Maribel was seeing anyone else, Paul said he had not inquired about that. He confirmed that he spoke with Maribel on Thursday evening and noted that he was working a shift from 4 p.m. until midnight that day, so they did not meet in person. Investigators observed that while he was cooperative, there was no assurance that he was being truthful. However, Paul's truck had a GPS tracker, allowing officers to monitor his movements that night. The data revealed that Paul was not near Maribel's home. Paul mentioned Maribel's roommate Kwang, noting that their relationship had recently deteriorated. He recounted that Maribel often complained about Kwang's inability to pay rent on time. During a conversation, Paul overheard Maribel tell Kwang that she wanted him to move out the next day. In a speakerphone call, Paul warned Kwang that he would be kicked out if he didn't leave as instructed. Paul offered to help Maribel and said he would come over if she needed assistance, but she declined, stating it wasn't necessary. This was their final conversation. After the conflict between Maribel and Kwang became known, investigators learned that Kwang, who was 54 years old, had moved to the United States from South Korea as a teenager. He had no significant criminal record, and there was nothing indicating any illegal activities in his past. However, further investigation uncovered a history of anger issues. Kwang's sister had once filed a complaint against him due to his volatile temper. While examining his social media, investigators noted that Kwang and Maribel Ramos appeared to share a close bond. Nevertheless, when they spoke with Maribel's family, they learned that her relationship with Kwang was not as ideal as it seemed in their social media photos. It appeared that although they shared a friendly relationship, Kwang desired something deeper. In the summer of 2012, Lucy received a call from Kwang, who admitted that he was in love with Maribel and was trying to find her because of this. Lucy later informed Maribel about the conversation and urged her to promptly reject Kwang's feelings before things escalated. Maribel then spoke with Kwang, making it clear that she did not have romantic feelings for him. At first, Kwang seemed to handle the rejection well. However, as time passed, he began taking extreme actions to win Maribel over. He changed his wardrobe, got a tattoo, and spent over $10,000 on plastic surgery to appear younger. Police discovered alarming evidence, a frantic phone call from Maribel to them just 12 days before she went missing. In the call, Maribel expressed that she felt unsafe around her roommate. To understand the relationship between Maribel and Kwang, investigators brought him in for questioning. He appeared calm and friendly, expressing concern over her disappearance. Kwang claimed they had been roommates for about a year and a half, sharing enjoyable experiences like cruises, dancing, and parties. However, investigators suspected that the reality was not as ideal as Kwang portrayed it, and pressed him to explain Maribel's 911 call. Kwang mentioned that he and Maribel went to karaoke that night and ended up arguing. He noted that Maribel's behavior when drinking alcohol could be either very friendly or aggressive. When detectives asked about the argument, Kwang mentioned that it occurred on Thursday evening and was about the rent. He believed the detectives should investigate further, since he last saw Maribel at 9 p.m. when he took a drive to cool off after their disagreement. When he returned, she was missing, and he thought someone might have taken her away because her car was still in its place. Although Kwang's account seemed believable, some aspects of his appearance raised suspicions. He claimed he had scratched himself on bushes while walking in the park, which seemed odd. At this stage of the investigation, there was no evidence that Kwang was involved in Maribel's disappearance. As days passed, the search for Maribel became increasingly difficult, and the likelihood of finding her alive decreased. To uncover new evidence, detectives decided to involve forensic experts to thoroughly examine Maribel's home, hoping they would find clues that were previously overlooked. During this time, Kwang cooperated with the police, allowing them to search his rented car without a warrant, including a detailed inspection by a police dog trained to detect human remains. However, the dog did not find any traces in the house or the vehicles. Meanwhile, a few days after Maribel's disappearance, Kwang expressed his feelings of missing his friend on forums dedicated to the case. Despite his attempts to portray himself as a grieving roommate, Kwang began to distance himself from Maribel's family, whom he had previously considered friends. He also declined to participate in most vigils and searches for her. This behavior raised red flags for investigators, who hoped he would slip up and reveal information about Maribel. Kwang visited a public library to use the internet since he had given his phone and laptop to the police. Detectives requested surveillance footage, which showed nothing unusual. He used the laptop for about 2 hours before returning it. They were eager to check the browser history on the laptop, but it had been cleared to protect users' privacy after it was returned, adding to the police's frustrations as they continued their efforts to find Maribel. Maribel's family were devastated when Maribel went missing, and no one knew where she had gone or what had happened to her. In their desperation, her family put up flyers throughout the city, hoping someone might have seen her or have information about her whereabouts. However, this effort was not enough. Realizing they needed to reach a wider audience, they created a social media account to share Maribel's situation and ask for help from anyone who might know something about Maribel. For 2 weeks, the police had no leads on her disappearance. Then, an unexpected development occurred. Maribel's family announced on social media that they would organize a walk and search for her in Modjeska Canyon. At that time, detectives discovered that Kwang had returned the rented car, which raised their suspicions. They decided to search the car again. During the first search, the police dog did not detect any scent, but this time it quickly reacted to a smell coming from the trunk. While this evidence was not enough to make an arrest, it indicated to the detectives that they were on the right track. When Kwang went to the library to use the laptop again, he saw on Facebook that Maribel's family was organizing a walk-and-search event in Modjeska Canyon. Unbeknownst to him, the police had obtained a warrant that allowed them to remotely access the laptop he was using. Detectives were able to see his search history, which included queries about how long it takes for a human body to decompose. He also looked up the location in the canyon where Maribel's family planned to gather for the search. After searching on Google Maps, he zoomed in and out of the area, which was 10 miles away from Modjeska Canyon. The officers following his actions were shocked. It became clear that Kwang had inadvertently revealed to them the location where he had hidden Maribel's body. Investigators quickly arrived at a remote area with no nearby houses. After searching for 30 minutes, they discovered a shallow grave. While they suspected the remains belonged to Maribel, they needed forensic confirmation before arresting Kwang. Forensic experts confirmed the victim's identity using dental records. The remains were indeed those of Maribel Ramos. Due to various animals in the environment, determining the exact cause of death was not possible. When Kwang noticed the approaching officers, he attempted to escape by jumping out of a window, but was apprehended and taken to the police station. He continued to deny any involvement in Maribel's disappearance, unaware that the police had already identified her remains. Kwang was charged with multiple offenses. Maribel's family continued to cherish her memory. Yet it became clear that the circumstances surrounding her death were too uncertain to reach a conclusion. Authorities could only speculate on how she might have died at Kwang's hands. Prosecutors claimed that Kwang was in love with Maribel, while she did not reciprocate his feelings. Given Maribel's combat training, which could have allowed her to easily overpower Kwang in a fair fight, it was assumed he must have set up an attack. Investigators believed he entered her room during the night and suffocated her while she slept. He then reportedly placed her body in the trunk of his rented car and drove to a secluded spot where he had to crawl under a taut wire. Although there was a possibility that he moved Maribel's body multiple times, there was no evidence to support that theory. Additionally, very little forensic evidence connected Kwang to the crime. In court, Kwang did not plead guilty. He expressed that he would not apologize for something he insisted he did not do. He stated that he had never searched for the grave's location in the canyon and suggested that someone was framing him. He claimed he had nothing to contribute and maintained that he was not involved in Maribel's death. Kwang proposed that Maribel might have died from an illness after years of struggling with post-traumatic stress disorder and feelings of paranoia. The prosecutors acknowledged that the case was largely circumstantial, highlighting that key evidence included a library search that focused on the specific area where Maribel's body was discovered. He was held in the Orange County Jail on a $1 million bail. In July 2014, the court found Kwang Choi-joy guilty of murdering Maribel Ramos. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison. He continues to maintain his innocence. Hello everyone, today we will learn about another case. The case of Amy Mullis. Love triangles are among the most common causes of domestic crimes. This is a story about the Mullis family's farm in Ulville, Iowa, USA, a quiet and peaceful place with a close-knit community. On November 10, 2018, the younger Mullis children stayed home while their parents worked with their oldest son, Tristan, in one of the farm's pig barns. The family divided responsibilities among themselves to ensure everyone handled tasks they were best suited for. On that day, Tristan was cleaning the barn while his father, Todd Mullis, checked the electrical equipment. Tristan's mother, Amy, joined them a little later. When she entered the barn, she tripped over a bucket and nearly fell. Just a day before this incident, Amy had been experiencing health issues, including dizziness and pain. She had visited the doctor multiple times for similar problems. It seemed she hadn't fully recovered, yet she still decided to work. Noticing his wife's exhaustion, her husband suggested that she go home and rest. Todd mentioned that she could assist him later once he finished the main tasks with Tristan. Amy agreed but wanted to complete a small chore first. She intended to visit the nearby shed to retrieve a carrier for their animals, as they needed to take their cat to the veterinary clinic the following day. After Amy left, the father and son continued their work together. Eventually, Todd glanced out the window and noticed that the door of the distant shed was still open, even though Amy had been gone for quite some time. She should have returned by now with the carrier and closed the barn. Growing concerned that something might have happened, he worried that his wife might have fallen again due to her dizziness. He then asked Tristan to go outside and check what was happening. Perhaps his mother needed help. When Tristan arrived at the shed, he was shocked to see his mother with the tines of a corn rake protruding from her body. He rushed inside and realized it was critical. He immediately called for his father. Todd quickly ran to the source of the scream and recognized that he needed to act fast. He instructed his son to fetch the family pickup truck. Tristan was already skilled at driving and could navigate the property swiftly. While Tristan went for the truck, Todd attempted to help Amy and carry her out of the shed. The rake made it difficult for him to maneuver through the narrow space, forcing him to pull it out of her body. By the time Tristan arrived with the pickup truck, Todd had loaded Amy into the vehicle and quickly took the driver's seat. Tristan held his dying mother in his arms as his father called 911. The dispatcher received a call from a very agitated man who was shouting for help. Todd reported that an accident had occurred on the farm and that his wife was seriously injured. He explained to the operator that they had found her lying face down in the shed with a corn rake sticking out of her back. The corn rake had 4 straight, sharp tines designed to easily penetrate hay or piles of leaves, and unfortunately, they had pierced her flesh. While he was on the phone with the operator, Amy stopped breathing. The dispatcher instructed him to pull over and provide first aid. Following the operator's guidance, the father and son stopped their vehicle, laid Amy on the ground, alternated performing artificial respiration and chest compressions. Unfortunately, the resuscitation efforts did not have the desired effect. Todd took Amy to the emergency department, but there the doctors could only confirm the death of her. The police then called the father and son to the station to take their statements while forensic experts examined the scene. Tristan supported his father's account, which helped establish a solid alibi for Todd. Tristan firmly asserted that he had not taken his eyes off his father until he saw the rake protruding from his mother's back. He believes that a tragic accident has occurred. During the initial investigation, most of Tristan's account was corroborated. When Tristan and his father discovered Amy, she was still alive but unconscious. The police also interviewed Todd, who stated that he did not know how his wife was injured, as he was not present when it occurred. Todd speculated that she might have fallen onto a corn rake, possibly due to feeling dizzy. Although this explanation seems somewhat far-fetched, law enforcement chose to wait for the medical examiner's findings before drawing conclusions. The report arrived quickly, raising further questions. Notably, there were 6 puncture wounds from the corn rake, which was puzzling since the tool only had 4 prongs, meaning it should have left only 4 marks. The medical examiner noted that Amy had other injuries, including a bruise on her upper lip and several fresh bruises on her face. There were also similar bruises on her arms and legs, some of which appeared to be defensive wounds, suggesting that she had been in a struggle with at least one other person. There was no doubt that it was not an accident. It was clear that Amy had been attacked. Detectives began investigating the murder, and after new developments emerged, forensic experts returned to the barn to closely examine the scene and validate the coroner's suspicions. During the initial examination right after the incident, it was already dark, so the detectives needed to conduct a thorough inspection this time. Forensic scientists found several bloodstains in the shed, where Tristan had discovered his injured mother. There were small splatters on the chemical bags along the walls, on the floor, and on all nearby surfaces. The scene indicated a violent attack, as the blood had spread widely. This suggested that Amy could not have fallen onto the corn rake by herself, as her husband had claimed. She had been beaten with a farming tool, receiving 2 or 3 blows. The area where the crime occurred had been overall very peaceful. In the last 10 years, this was only the 4th murder. For this reason, law enforcement officials decided to seek assistance from state authorities, who had much more experience in solving such cases. Investigators spoke with the neighbors of the Malus family, who revealed that their marriage had long been troubled. Their spouses were experiencing difficulties, frequently argued, even though the husband was known to be calm and non-confrontational. This raised suspicions among the police, leading them to believe that Todd not be telling the truth. He had a motive, making him the primary suspect in the case. Consequently, the police began to examine him more closely. The tragic loss of Amy, a kind and vibrant person, shocked the local community. Many were surprised that a mother of 3 could find herself in such a deadly situation. Detectives began investigating the couple's personal life to find a possible motive for the murder. 5 years earlier, Amy had cheated on Todd, which shattered his trust in her. This betrayal led to a decline in their once ideal relationship. However, they worked through their issues, decided to try to save their marriage for the sake of their children. They attended counseling with a family psychologist. Amy left her nursing job at the hospital to spend more time with her family, help on the farm, where she took care of the plants and animals and managed the family's finances. She told her friends that she quit her job at Todd's, urging to avoid new temptations. Meanwhile, Todd also made an effort to spend more time with Amy and their children. Despite these efforts, the psychologist observed that Todd could never fully regain his trust in Amy. Amy spent all her time on the farm, where Todd was usually present both day and night. As a result, Todd's behavior became much more controlling than it had been before. Later, Amy expressed her frustration, saying that her husband was practically monitoring her. They seemed to have reached an agreement about how they spent their time together, which Todd believed was a way to rebuild trust in their relationship. However, this situation became a major issue for Amy. She jokingly referred to herself as her husband's prisoner. She shared with her close friends. Todd even restricted Amy's friendships, deciding who she could communicate with and what interests she could pursue. One of the friends he allowed, Patricia Christopherson, noted that since 2018, Amy had stopped feeling joy in her marriage. Patricia claimed that even a year earlier, Amy had been unhappy, and her affair was a way to escape Todd's excessive control. Others in their circle suspected that Todd was involved in the murder. Several witnesses supported claims that Todd had total control over his wife and exhibited suspicious behavior. However, Todd presented a different narrative. He claimed that he spent nearly all his time with his wife and was very happy, asserting that there were no issues in their relationship. He stated that they had fully restored their previous harmonious and communication that they once had. However, during the investigation, it became clear that this was not entirely accurate. In July 2018, just a few months before the tragedy, Todd noticed changes in Amy's behavior, which led him to question her fidelity. He reviewed phone records and found that Amy had been communicating with another man, Jerry Frasher. Todd discovered around 120 messages exchanged between them and confronted Jerry directly. Jerry, who worked as an assistant on their farm and handled administrative tasks, denied having an affair, insisting that their correspondence was purely work-related. Todd was unable to access their message exchanges, which made him skeptical of Jerry's claims. He even contacted Jerry's wife, who reassured him that she trusted her husband completely and had no concerns about infidelity. This conversation seemed to ease Todd's worries, and he stopped suspecting his wife of any new infidelities. However, investigations later revealed that Amy and Jerry were romantically involved. Amy was having an affair again, which investigators believed could be a motive for murder. The police theorized that Todd discovered the affair, overwhelmed by shock, killed his wife. However, this theory was complicated by Todd's alibi. He had been with Tristan until Tristan went to check on his mother. Tristan claimed there were no arguments between his parents that day, and he had kept an eye on his father. Despite this, the police wanted to explore another possibility. Jerry Frasher might also have had a motive for murder. Jerry did not want to leave his family. Could he have killed Amy to keep his family intact? The detectives needed to investigate this angle as well. Amy often expressed frustration about Todd working too much, leaving her to handle various farm tasks that she disliked. She wanted to go out and enjoy life, spending more time in town. After trying to salvage her relationship, it became clear to her that she and Todd had significant differences. Jerry often visited the farm for work, where he interacted with Todd and Amy. Occasionally, he spoke with Amy privately, and their conversations gradually turned into flirting, then an intimate affair. This relationship began in late May 2018. The couple met about once a week for intimate, typically in cars on the farm's dirt roads or during brief stays in motel rooms. For Amy, it became a source of inspiration, leading her to express a desire to leave her husband and marry Jerry. This would require Jerry to get a divorce, but his wife was unaware of the affair. Jerry was content in his marriage and had no intention of divorcing. He did not take his relationship with Amy seriously and even wanted to end it, as he felt it had gone too far. Law enforcement officials recovered most of the letters exchanged between Jerry and Amy, revealing that their relationship lasted until the summer of 2018. At that point, Jerry suggested they slow things down because he was uncertain about their future together. Meanwhile, there were indications that Amy was determined to confess her feelings. This created a sense of threat for Jerry, providing him with a strong motive for murder. Jerry spent about an hour and a half confessing to the affair but maintained that he could not have killed Amy. He stated that at the time of the attack, he was at his home in Anamosa, which is a 45-minute drive from the crime scene. Investigators checked the mobile phone data of Jerry, which showed activity at the same times every hour. Jerry's cell phone active at around 10:45, 11:45, 12:45, all in Anamosa. However, this did not definitively confirm his alibi, as a calculated murderer would likely avoid taking their phone to the crime scene. The hourly activity raised suspicions, leaving him not entirely free from scrutiny. Investigators were still focused on the widower, Todd. He had a significant financial motive as well. If a divorce occurred, he would have to pay more than half of his income to support their 3 children. Friends mentioned that Amy, despite wanting a divorce, was afraid to leave Todd because she feared his reaction. Some described him as rude and aggressive, suggesting he could be capable of murder, although he had never been seen treating his wife poorly. The investigators then turned their attention to Todd's behavior on the day of Amy's death. During questioning, his reactions raised suspicions. Typically, innocent people defend themselves aggressively, but Todd remained calm when asked about the murder allegations. This calmness could indicate subconscious guilt. Overall, he was known to be a calm person with a quiet temperament. The farm had several cameras, one of which had a view of almost the entire area around the barn, where the murder occurred. Unfortunately, no recordings from that day were saved. It appears someone deleted them to hide their involvement. Given the circumstances, the prime suspect was the victim's husband. In February 2019, Todd Mollis was arrested and charged with murdering his wife. Nearly a year after Amy's death, both her family and the relatives of Todd gathered at the courthouse. Todd, a hard-working farmer known for being a devoted father, now faced charges for the brutal murder of his wife. The defense attorney agreed with the prosecution that the crime was premeditated but argued that Todd could not have attacked his wife with the corn rake, as Tristan had been in sight of him the whole time. They claimed there was no physical evidence linking Todd to the crime, no fingerprints, no DNA on the corn rake, and no traces of the attacker were found. The prosecution countered that the murder was driven by a personal motive, emphasizing that it wasn't a distant shooting but rather a close-range attack using an unusual weapon from the farm's tools. If a stranger had committed the crime, they likely wouldn't have used a tool found on the farm. Todd was familiar with that corn rake, skilled in its use, and knew exactly where it was kept. He acted decisively, leaving Amy no chance to escape. He attacked her multiple times. During the trial, many witnesses who knew both Amy and Todd testified. One of them was a doctor from the emergency room where the victim had worked as a nurse for many years. Amy was brought to the same hospital where she had previously saved lives. Unfortunately, shortly after her arrival, she was declared dead by the medical examiner and law enforcement. The doctors were puzzled by how a single blow from a 4-pronged corn rake could cause 6 deep wounds on Amy's body. The eldest son, Tristan, served as the main witness for the defense. Both sides carefully examined his statements during the hearings. The prosecution faced a challenge with the alibi that Tristan maintained. However, just days before the trial began, law enforcement re-interviewed Tristan. He admitted that he had lost sight of his father several times while fetching water for the shed, but insisted that his father was only gone for a few minutes each time. The defendant's lawyer argued that this brief absence was not enough time to commit the crime and hide the evidence. Yet, during the trial, Tristan changed his testimony again, stating that he could not accurately determine how long his father had been missing. This gave the prosecution a chance to highlight Todd's lack of an alibi. However, Tristan insisted that his father could not have killed his mother and claimed he did not see any blood on him, which allowed the defense attorney to build their argument. The defense maintained that Todd did not have enough time to get water, go to the shed, deal with his wife, and return. Furthermore, the blood spatter in the room where the attack took place was too extensive for the attacker to avoid getting covered in blood. The lawyer argued that the prosecution had no direct evidence against Todd, which was true. The case also leaned on the search histories of both the victim and the accused. Amy had searched online about how infidelity could affect property division in a divorce, while Todd's phone had concerning searches related to the consequences of murder. During the trial, Todd spent 3 hours answering the prosecutor's questions, maintaining his innocence and claiming he was unaware of Amy's new relationship. He explained to the jury that the security cameras were not functioning during the attack because, in his view, the cats had accidentally disconnected the wires while looking for a warm spot. Investigators was revealed that the cameras had been out of order for 2 weeks before Amy's death, and Todd only repaired the system after the police discovered the disconnected wires. By the end of the interrogations, the jury began deliberating the verdict. Because there was no direct evidence and many disagreements about the case, the jurors split into 2 groups with opposing opinions. After about 7 hours of discussion, Todd Mollis was found guilty of first-degree murder. The court sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Disappointed, Todd shook his head as he was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs. He immediately disagreed with the verdict once it was announced. He hired a new legal team and filed a motion for a retrial. Todd argued that no one was in the shed when his wife accidentally fell on a corn rake after losing consciousness. She had been feeling dizzy and even visited the hospital the day before her death. There was no substantial evidence against Todd, just speculation and rumors, but his appeal was denied. Now, he is focused on appealing the verdict from prison and believes that justice will eventually be served. He feels an accidental incident took the life of a mother of 3, and an unjust legal system took their father from them. Todd and Amy Mollis's 3 children are now cared for by Amy's family. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Graziella Monsi. The Monsi family had an 8-year-old daughter named Graziella Monsi, their only child and a long-awaited member of the family. They are businessmen who cater to tourists and have owned a shop for about 10 years where they sell nuts and dried fruits on the street leading to Castel del Monte. Their shop's prime location brought them steady and substantial income. Despite her young age, Graziella often helped her parents with the business, which made the family proud. Since childhood, she had been involved in their work, bringing energy and enthusiasm to the shop. The location was a bustling tourist area with a constant flow of customers, and her help was invaluable during busy times. Her cheerful and active nature left a lasting impression on customers who shopped there. One Saturday, a peak day for tourists, the Monsi family was hard at work, as weekends were typically their busiest. Graziella's grandfather often helped behind the counter during such busy periods, and she eagerly accompanied him to run small errands. That day, a large number of people came to Castel del Monte, keeping her grandfather busy at the stall, unable to step away. By evening, he grew tired and asked Graziella to go to the nearby fountain to fill a bottle with water. She happily agreed and left for the fountain, just a 5-minute walk away. However, her grandfather soon began to worry when she didn't return promptly. Graziella's grandfather comforted himself by thinking she might have met someone she knew and gotten distracted. However, after more than 20 minutes had passed and she still hadn't returned, he realized something was wrong. Worried, he walked to the fountain to check what might have delayed her. He was astonished to find Graziella nowhere to be seen, either on the road or near the fountain. He searched all the nearby streets carefully but couldn't locate her. Her disappearance seemed suspicious. The grandfather went back to the shop, hoping she might have returned through a different route, but she wasn't there. Roughly half an hour after she vanished, he informed her parents. Together, they began calling her friends and acquaintances, hoping someone had seen her. Sadly, no one they contacted had any information. Meanwhile, Monsi's entire family and some close friends gathered at the square near the store and began organizing a search. Less than an hour after Graziella vanished, the adults and teenagers divided into groups to search for her. The commotion caught the attention of passers-by and some tourists, prompting several volunteers to join the search effort. The Monsi family carried a photo of Graziella, asking anyone they encountered if they had seen her. A few people mentioned seeing a girl who looked like her earlier in the afternoon, but nobody knew where she might be or what had happened. The area was typically peaceful and quiet, making it hard to imagine someone attacking a girl in such a bustling location. After searching unsuccessfully for a few hours, the Monsi family reported Graziella missing at the local police station. The police acted quickly, and soon, the Carabinieri were involved in the search. Later, a witness approached an officer with a disturbing claim. He had heard a child's panicked cry coming from the wooded area near Castel del Monte. 2 police officers immediately went to investigate the location. When they arrived at the forest, they saw smoke rising from a fire. At first, they didn't think it was connected to Graziella's disappearance, but they decided to investigate to better understand the situation. Suspecting it might be a forest fire, they approached cautiously. As they got closer, about 10 meters away, they were hit by a distinct and horrifying smell: burnt flesh. Soon, the officers discovered a fire pit in the woods. In the flames, there were dry leaves burning, and underneath was what looked like a human body. To their horror, the body was child-sized, and the clothing matched the description of the dress Graziella had been wearing that day. The police immediately suspected the remains were hers. The fire had completely consumed her body, and she was found deceased. The area was thoroughly searched, but apart from fragments of Graziella's clothing in a lighter, likely used to start the fire, no other evidence was found to identify the perpetrator. Investigators decided to conduct a more thorough investigation of the area and aimed to collect surveillance footage from nearby cameras. A forensic expert later confirmed the grim discovery: the body was indeed Graziella's. An autopsy revealed that she had been deliberately murdered and burned. News of the incident spread quickly, making headlines the next day. Journalists flocked to Graziella's family, seeking comments on the tragic murder. When her relatives learned the full details of what had happened, they were in utter disbelief. They could not comprehend such a cruel and monstrous act. The entire community was deeply shaken. The media heightened public fear by extensively reporting on the horrific crime near the famous castle. This caused a sharp decline in tourist visits to the town, as people began to view the area as unsafe. The town's reputation as a popular destination suffered greatly, dealing a heavy blow to Andria's tourism industry. People are facing the tragedy and its lasting consequences. Meanwhile, investigators acted swiftly to find the perpetrator. From the very beginning, the police were determined to solve the case. Their primary theory was that a predator had enticed Graziella to leave the bustling tourist area and go to a more secluded location. There, he assaulted her and tried to cover up all evidence of the crime. Authorities initially believed that the attacker was likely an older, calculated, and experienced man. They began their investigation by reviewing a list of known criminals in the area who had criminal records related to abuse. However, as the case unfolded, this theory lost credibility. Investigators also considered the possibility that the perpetrator was a tourist who randomly targeted victims, including Graziella. To explore this, they analyzed tourist movements, but this idea also seemed increasingly improbable over time. As police interviewed witnesses, friends, and acquaintances of the Graziella family, one name kept coming up: Pasquale Tortora. He was a 20-year-old local man who worked illegally as a parking attendant on the same street as the Graziella family shop. Many people had noticed that since Graziella started working at the store, Pasquale had been observing her in a strange and unsettling way. Several individuals mentioned this, and their observations raised suspicions. When the police questioned Pasquale's friends, the concerns deepened. Some of his acquaintances had even joked that he seemed attracted to the 8-year-old girl. However, in the current situation, what had once been considered a harmless joke now carried a much darker implication. Could Pasquale have been a predator obsessed with Graziella? His family firmly denied this possibility, pointing out that he was raised in a respectable household and had no prior trouble with the law, at least, not until the tragic evening near Castel del Monte. However, despite his family's claims, Pasquale quickly became the main suspect. Investigators grew more suspicious after meeting with him. His t-shirt showed suspicious dark red stains, and his clothing was marked with dirt, as if he had been crawling or struggling on the ground. Additionally, His face bore small but clear scratches, resembling marks left by tiny hands in a desperate struggle. Pasquale, of course, denied any involvement in the attack on Graziella. However, during questioning by detectives, his testimony became increasingly inconsistent. He kept changing his story, which led investigators to suspect that he was hiding something. After just a few hours at the police station, Pasquale began to crumble under pressure. He then made a cold remark, stating that he found Graziella very beautiful, even though she was only 8 years old. Initially, he claimed that while walking in the woods, he stumbled upon Graziella's lifeless body already on fire. Frightened, he said he ran away, and the police showed up later. Later, he altered his story. He said he had seen Graziella heading to the fountain to fetch water. Since she knew him and trusted him, she wasn't afraid when he approached her. He emphasized that he had always acted calmly around her up to that point. Pasquale then mentioned that a dog had recently given birth to puppies in the nearby forest and claimed he had offered to show them to Graziella. This seemingly harmless excuse was the moment investigators grasped the horrifying reality of what had taken place. After breaking down completely, Pasquale confessed to his actions. He admitted to luring Graziella into the forest and, after committing the crime, setting her on fire to destroy any evidence. However, he denied intending to abuse her. Instead, he claimed his actions were part of a so-called Cato game, which had escalated beyond his control. The media quickly sensationalized the story, amplifying it with rumors and disturbing details. This overwhelming wave of coverage fueled public confusion. The true motive behind the murder remained unclear, as Pasquale's testimony was riddled with contradictions, leaving many questions unanswered. The police uncovered several inconsistencies in his account. His timeline didn't add up, and his explanations lacked credibility. One fact, however, was undeniable. The fire began around 10 p.m., but Graziella had already been missing for nearly 3 hours. So, what happened during that time frame? Later, Pasquale disclosed a chilling detail. He lit the fire after hearing people nearby in the forest. Believing they were searching for Graziella, he panicked and acted out of fear. However, the most horrifying discovery came from forensic experts. They concluded that she was still alive when the fire was set. Investigators continued to intensify their questioning of Pasquale. A troubling question emerged: how had he managed to commit such a horrific act while escaping with only minor injuries? Could he truly have acted alone? This led authorities to consider the possibility of an accomplice or even multiple accomplices, turning the focus of the investigation in a new direction. The police decided to interrogate Pasquale again. Eventually, he agreed to cooperate, admitting that fear had previously stopped him from revealing the entire truth. In his revised statement, Pasquale claimed that he never intended to harm Graziella himself. Instead, he stated that a group of young men, all aged 18 to 20, had coerced him. Pasquale identified 4 individuals: Michele Zagaria, Giuseppe Di Bari, Domenico Margiotta, and Vincenzo Corritella. He alleged that this group was waiting in the forest. According to him, there was no plan to harm or assault Graziella, but he had lost a bet with them. As a result, they pressured him to lure her into the woods. Pasquale recounted that when Graziella arrived in the forest, the 4 young men attacked her. They stopped her from escaping and forced her into silence. When they heard adults searching for her, they panicked. Fearing legal consequences, they decided to get rid of her. However, they didn't have any fuel to start a fire. Growing desperate, they tried to set her clothes on fire but failed. At one point, Graziella regained consciousness and screamed, prompting them to beat her again until she passed out. They tried to start the fire again, this time covering her body with leaves and using a lighter. The flames finally caught. All 4 young men came from respected families and had no history of violent behavior or serious crimes. Those who knew them described them as calm and well-mannered. Only one of them had a criminal record for a minor theft. Despite Pasquale's testimony, the idea that these 4 young men had decided to burn Graziella alive seemed unimaginable. However, once Pasquale provided their names, the police swiftly arrested them. News of their arrest shocked Italy, with the media covering every detail and fueling public outrage. From the beginning, the four suspects denied any involvement in Graziella's death. They claimed they had no idea why they were under investigation. Still, detectives remained determined to interrogate them until they uncovered the full truth about what happened that night. Unlike Pasquale, there was no physical evidence connecting the four men to the crime. When police searched their homes, nothing incriminating was found. They did acknowledge that Pasquale had an unhealthy obsession with Graziella, but they strongly denied having any part in her murder. Despite lengthy interrogations, none of the suspects admitted to any involvement. With no solid evidence against them, they were released but remained under close surveillance as the primary suspects. In a chilling development, the same four young men were later seen carrying Graziella's coffin at her funeral. Pasquale revealed that they were crying, appearing to be deeply affected by the loss. While detained, the young men claimed they were devastated because they recognized the young girl, often seeing her in the Monsi family shop, even though they never spoke to her. The police suspected that their presence at the funeral was not coincidental. Although their connection to Graziella's family was minimal, they might have been burdened by guilt and sought some form of redemption. Alternatively, they might have been attempting to monitor the investigation into their possible involvement in the crime. During the next round of interrogations, the suspects were questioned separately. Vincenzo and Giuseppe claimed they had an alibi, supported by the testimony of young Luda. They stated that they had been at the city's gaming club on the day Graziella disappeared. Meanwhile, Michelle and Domenico refused to cooperate with the investigation, declined to answer questions, and demanded lawyers, which only heightened police suspicion. The detectives proceeded to verify Vincenzo and Giuseppe's alibi by visiting the gaming club. While their presence at the club was confirmed, they left after about an hour and were unable to account for their whereabouts afterward. As a result, investigators couldn't rule out their involvement in Graziella's torture. Unexpectedly, Michelle and Domenico confessed to the crime, largely corroborating Pasquale's account. According to their confession, the group invited them to the forest that evening, saying they wanted to play with fire. When Michelle and Domenico arrived, the others were already present. Pasquale was assigned to lure a victim and chose Graziella, a girl who, according to their friends, made him feel uneasy but seemed like an easy target. Pasquale later confirmed that he had discovered Graziella by the fountain while she was fetching water. He lured her by inviting her to see puppies that had recently been born in the nearby forest. Graziella, trusting and unsuspecting, did not imagine that this could lead to harm and agreed out of curiosity. Pasquale deceived and coaxed Graziella into following him. Since Graziella loved animals, she was eager to see the puppies, especially because Pasquale was someone she knew and trusted. She never expected such a cruel betrayal. The wooded area where the ambush was planned was nearby, about a 15 to 20-minute walk from where he first approached her. By then, her grandfather would have already begun searching for her. When they reached the location, Michelle, Giuseppe, Domenico, and Vincenzo jumped out from their hiding spots. Graziella was terrified. In that moment, she likely realized she had been trapped, but it was too late. She had no way to defend herself. While mildly intoxicated, the perpetrators continued drinking and seemed to take amusement in Graziella's fear. According to their later confessions, they claimed they didn't plan to assault her but merely wanted to torment and mock her, taking advantage of her vulnerability. Graziella was so frightened that she went into a state of shock. During the incident, their group accidentally caused Graziella to fall and hit her head against a stone. Initially, the group claimed they did not plan to imprison her. Their intention was to restrain her to scare her further, but she collapsed and lost consciousness. Believing she was dead, they panicked, fearing that she was already being searched for. Likely due to alcohol intoxication clouding their judgment, they decided to destroy all evidence of what had occurred. They thought setting a fire would accomplish this. Some claims by the suspects were partially supported by evidence. For instance, the forensic examination did not conclusively reveal any signs of abuse. Graziella was discovered wearing underwear. The condition of the remains was poor due to severe burns, which made it impossible to confirm or rule out abuse. The Carabinieri suspected that fire might have destroyed evidence, as hoped by the group. At the time, Michele, Giuseppe, Domenico, and Vincenzo continued to insist that the incident had been accidental. The court finally decided the fate of the juvenile offenders. Vincenzo and Giuseppe confessed that they had gone to the forest because Pasquale invited them, unaware of what playing with fire meant. They claimed they were unwittingly drawn into something far more sinister. According to their testimony, they were horrified by what transpired and quickly left, not wanting to remain at the scene. However, they failed to realize that this dangerous situation would ultimately lead to police intervention. Their actions were driven by fear, either of the other participants or of the legal consequences they could face if accused of taking part. Despite inconsistencies in the group's accounts, the trial concluded with Pasquale Tortora receiving the lightest sentence, 30 years in prison. This was due to two key factors. First, he was the only member who cooperated voluntarily with the investigation. Second, despite extensive tests conducted by investigators, the evidence consistently showed that Pasquale was not the one who set Graziella's body on fire, although he actively participated in the abuse. Investigators concluded that the four criminals, Michele, Giuseppe, Domenico, and Vincenzo, were responsible for dumping the body, and they imposed severe punishment on them. Convicted of kidnapping, child abuse, and premeditated murder, they received life sentences in solitary confinement. This meant they would remain in prison for the rest of their lives without interaction with other inmates. During the reading of the verdict, Graziella's mother fainted and had to be assisted by her husband. At the same time, tensions erupted among the defendants' families, resulting in arguments. Graziella's relatives expressed satisfaction with the sentences, believing them to be justified, except in the case of Pasquale, who they felt had been punished too lightly for luring their child into the woods and sealing her tragic fate. The court's severe ruling angered Vincenzo and Giuseppe, both of whom maintained their innocence adamantly. Their fervent claims gained them some supporters who believed their protestations, but this did not lead to a successful appeal. 8 years later, Vincenzo Corratella, 27, ended his life, possibly out of despair or guilt over his actions. While in prison, he discreetly brought a rope cord into his cell and used it to end his life. Just days prior, his mother had visited him and continued to firmly believe in his innocence. However, he had already lost hope. On June 19, 2013, Michele's lawyer requested a retrial, citing alleged judicial errors in opposing the verdict. The court, however, denied the request. Pasquale's mother publicly apologized to the Monsi family for her son's actions, expressing her belief that he should fully face the consequences of his crime. Despite this, Graziella's mother rejected the apology. She responded firmly, stating that Pasquale should experience the same pain their daughter had endured. She held the belief that if he had not led Graziella into the forest, their daughter would still be alive. As a result, Graziella's parents primarily blamed Pasquale for their loss. Graziella Monsi's name remains etched in memory across Italy. Near Castel del Monte, a small tombstone commemorates her, featuring her name, photograph, and a brief account of her tragically short life. Locals and tourists often leave flowers and toys at the site, though it is most frequently visited by Graziella's close family and friends. 24 years after the tragedy, Pasquale Tortora was released from prison. His original sentence was reduced by 6 years due to good behavior. Now 44 years old, he is attempting to rebuild his life, though it is uncertain whether he will succeed. Among the group involved in the crime, Pasquale was the only one tried through an abbreviated process, which led to a lighter punishment. Following the incident, the boys who were involved severed ties with each other. Their relationships remained fractured, even after Pasquale's release. He has expressed deep regret, stating that not a day passes without him reflecting on the harm he caused to Graziella and her family. Pasquale admits that, if given the chance to turn back time, he would never have committed the crime. Throughout his ordeal, his family provided crucial support, helping him endure that dark period and rebuild his life, a kindness for which he remains deeply grateful. Dasha, Graziella's mother, strongly objected to Pasquale's early release, claiming that it weakened the integrity of the law. She believes that individuals like him remain dangerous to society, are incapable of change, and should not be given second chances. Vincenzo and Giuseppe, both maintaining their innocence, questioned why Pasquale acted as he did. Vincenzo tragically died, leaving behind a suicide note in which he insisted on his innocence and expressed anger at the injustice he had endured. He entrusted evidence to a trusted person to support his claims in the future but lost the will to continue fighting for his freedom. Giuseppe, Domenico, and Michelle remain isolated. Giuseppe continues to proclaim his innocence, spending his days reading the Bible. He has accepted his sentence and is not pursuing an appeal but firmly believes he will eventually be released when his complete lack of involvement in the murder is proven. His lawyer and family share this belief, as did the late Vincenzo. All three insist that Pasquale masterminded the tragedy. They assert that he lured Graziella into the forest, tortured her, and was solely responsible for the crime. Their claims are backed by evidence. Only Pasquale's body showed signs of a struggle, such as scratches inflicted by Graziella. His clothes had dirt and her blood on them, while the others had no such traces. Despite this, Pasquale received the lightest sentence and has been released. Jessica Edens was born on January 22, 1981, in a small suburb of New York State, USA. She came from a large family, with a sister named Diane and two half-brothers, Nathan and Adam. Jessica spent her early years surrounded by loving parents and siblings, with whom she developed warm relationships. She didn't have outstanding academic success but was always creative, dreaming of becoming a photographer. When her parents recognized this passion, they bought her an amateur camera, which she carried everywhere. She took pictures of people, nature, cities, and architecture, anything that caught her attention. Her work was admired and praised. During her teenage years, Jessica actively pursued this passion and mastered the craft. She began to shoot weddings and various events, initially for free, then for a small fee. This allowed her to earn enough money for her own needs, and the idea of building a real business became increasingly appealing. Jessica's personal life was also progressing. She was sociable, active, attractive, and always attracted a lot of attention. On November 19, 2007, she gave birth to a son named Hayden King. Jessica became pregnant during a rapidly developing relationship with a young man, but the love between them faded quickly, and they broke up before Hayden was born. However, Jessica remained optimistic and maintained friendly relations with the child's biological father, allowing him to communicate with Hayden. Jessica was determined to provide everything her child needed, regardless of whether she had a partner or was raising him as a single mother. Fortunately, she did not have to be alone for long. In 2008, Jessica met a man named Benjamin Edens. They quickly found common ground, grew closer, and within a few meetings, they could not imagine their lives without each other. They was in no hurry to officially register their marriage, as both were creative individuals who understood each other well. After a few months, they moved in together, and Jessica began to contemplate having more children. After a while, they officially got married in 2010. Shortly thereafter, they decided to move to a new large house located in a small, cozy town in Easley, South Carolina, which was ideal for a quiet family life. Their family relationships flourished, and Jessica was convinced she had found the man of her dreams, a feeling that was mutual. 2 years later, on July 19, 2012, they welcomed a daughter named Harper Edens. Jessica believes this further strengthens her relationship with Benjamin. He was a wonderful father who spent all his free time with Harper. He also became so close to Hayden that the boy did not suspect Benjamin was not his biological father. By 2017, Hayden was in the 4th grade, while his younger sister Harper was about to start 1st grade in the fall. This was an exciting milestone. From the outside, Jessica's family appeared perfect. She had 2 children, a beloved job, and a husband whom she described to everyone as the best person. Her eldest child was a good student, and the family expected the same from Harper. Jessica's passion for photography thrived, but when she had her daughter, she decided to take a break and become a housewife, stepping back from her small but successful photo business. However, as Harper grew more independent, Jessica returned to attending various events to conduct professional photography. To simplify her client search, she created a website where she introduced herself as a photographer from Greenville. Jessica described her life as perfect, but, as often happens, things were exaggerated. Behind the facade of love and understanding, difficulties began to arise in the marriage. Over time, Benjamin's feelings cooled, and tension accumulated between them. Jessica wanted to understand what was happening as she began to notice uncharacteristic behaviors in her husband. He would come home from work, immediately run into the shower without even saying hello to his wife and children, as if he were trying to hide something. More and more often, he stayed at work much longer than his shift lasted, citing overtime and global projects that no one could confirm. He began to actively engage in sports, carefully monitored his appearance, and switched to healthy eating. All this could look like ordinary healthy habits that people develop with age, but not with Jessica. She began to suspect Benjamin of cheating. Quickly, a suitable candidate for an affair appeared. A young, attractive woman had recently started at her husband's workplace. This woman's name was Meredith Rahm. She was born on October 29, 1988, in Collierville, Tennessee. In Jessica's opinion, it was on Meredith that her husband had set his eyes. In the early years of Meredith's life, her parents divorced, and her mother quickly found a new man and remarried, so Meredith had a stepfather named Carlton Chambers. He was a worthy person and became like a second father to her. The family in which she grew up was friendly and loving. Meredith had a younger sister named Brittany Rowell. She dedicated herself to her studies from an early age and was focused on career success. She studied well and was creative, like Jessica, but family and children were of little interest to her. In 2009, she graduated from the University of Memphis with a bachelor's degree in international business. After gaining some necessary experience, she moved to Greenville. Meredith was very independent and self-confident, which immediately caught Benjamin's eye. By the time they met, Meredith had started working at the same company as Benjamin. In fact, Jessica's suspicions were justified. Immediately after meeting Meredith, her husband became attracted to her. Their feelings come from both sides. They started dating in secret, and their affair continued for a year. Now, Benjamin finally realized that he wanted to be with his young mistress and wanted to break up with Jessica, but he didn't know how to approach the issue. He was afraid of offending his wife and wanted to avoid the difficulties of the divorce process. For a long time, Benjamin was torn between his family and his mistress. His wife's suspicions only aggravated the situation. The more accusations she made, the more inevitable the breakup felt, which provoked constant quarrels. Jessica did not trust her husband and wanted to find out what was going on. He tried to distance himself, but this could not go on forever. It was time to tell the truth, but Benjamin could not bring himself to do it. Instead of confessing, he decided to move out on far-fetched grounds, citing constant pressure from his wife. On April 11, 2017, Benjamin packed his things and moved from the shared family home to a rented apartment. At least that is what he initially told his wife. Jessica kept hoping that these were only temporary difficulties that many people experience, and that their marriage would be saved. She believed she could convince her husband to return to her and their children. Benjamin tried to avoid the topic of separation altogether, reluctantly answered calls and messages, which only offended her more. The betrayal was of such a magnitude that she could not forgive it. She was angry, and her hopes for a family reunion were shattered. But most of all, she was furious that Benjamin simply ignored her. As the persecution began, Jessica spread various damaging facts about Meredith on all social networks and on any sites where she could post information, exposing her as the homewrecker and her husband as a cheater. Jessica continued to communicate regularly with Benjamin, trying to win him back. Instead, he finally decided to file for divorce. Telling Jessica this provoked even more anger from her, and she now decided to annoy him as much as possible. She knew how much Benjamin loved their daughter Harper, so she sought sole custody of the girl. He had always been a caring father and loved the children, including Hayden. Therefore, he was against such a decision. Benjamin wanted to maintain the right to communicate with the children. He did not want to sit idly by. He hoped to smooth over the conflict and therefore proposed joint custody. Jessica was adamant. Against this backdrop, a serious custody battle began, and tensions escalated. Realizing that it would not be possible to agree amicably, Benjamin went to court on July 11th. He wanted to gain an advantage and testified under oath that Jessica was using the children as a weapon of revenge. By this point, Jessica had completely prevented meetings and communication between the children with their father, not even allowing contact through social networks and mobile phones. Everything was under her total control. Benjamin was afraid she could go too far. Simultaneously, Jessica intensified her harassment of Benjamin and Meredith. She continued to post not just hateful words toward Meredith on social media but also use graphic photos and other offensive captions. Previously, Jessica had tried to portray Benjamin's mistress as a family destroyer. Now, even more disturbing captions began to appear. She claimed that Meredith would get what she deserved, though she never specified what she meant. Meredith, the target of the harassment, began to fear that all of this could be dangerous. However, Benjamin insisted that Jessica had no history of violence, so he believed the situation would gradually settle down. He tried not to provoke her further, but it had little effect. The situation only worsened. When Jessica learned about the filing of a joint custody application by her husband, she was furious. Benjamin had always been a decent person, a valuable employee who earned a good salary and had no bad habits or addictions, so there were no serious grounds for denying him custody or terminating his contact with the children. He simply wanted to see them. Now that he had received the right to visit, which Jessica could not oppose. Due to the impossibility of taking revenge, she began to come up with more sophisticated ways to annoy him. Every short communication with Benjamin ended in conflicts and accusations. It was even more annoying to her that the mistress would be in contact with the children. During this period, Benjamin and Meredith regularly contacted the police to complain about Jessica's behavior. In particular, Meredith could no longer tolerate the publications that Jessica made about her daily on various social networks. She starts having problems at work when Jessica tries to turn things around her. Benjamin tried to prove that Jessica's behavior was stalking and very disturbing. Worse, he began receiving frightening messages from Jessica, all concerning the children. It seemed she was trying to intimidate him with ambiguous phrases, and he worried that his daughter might be in danger. In July 2017, after a court meeting, he called the police to check on the welfare of the children at Jessica's house. He described the situation in detail. He felt powerless since Jessica still interfered with the meetings, and he did not want to use force, fearing she would use this in court against him to strip him of his joint custody rights. The officers who responded reported that everything was fine, but the anxiety from the threats continued to grow. On July 12th, they discussed joint custody again. All attempts by Jessica to prevent this were unsuccessful, making her even more furious. During the day, Benjamin begins to receive more disturbing messages from his ex-wife. It was obvious to her that there was no legal way to limit the children's communication with their father, so she tried to irritate him further with her frightening messages. Benjamin contacted the police again and asked the patrol officers to go to the family home to check on the children's well-being. When the officers arrived, they again did not see anything suspicious. The report compiled by the patrolman stated that everything was fine, the family seemed normal, Jessica behaved calmly, and her son and daughter were in a good mood while watching a movie when the officers arrived. At that moment, Jessica insisted that Harper call Benjamin, realizing that he had called the police. All of this became part of her insidious plan to expose him as a liar. While the officer was in the house, he discussed the potential resumption of relations with Benjamin. Jessica denied wanting to reconcile, calling him a traitor who had cheated for a whole year. She couldn't forgive him and intended to use this in court to achieve sole custody of their daughter. She didn't want him in the children's lives. While the officer was filling out the report, Jessica began insisting that Benjamin and Meredith were very dangerous people, especially to the children. She claimed to have suffered from their behavior since the divorce process began and insisted that they were trying to portray her in a bad light. Jessica wanted to obtain a restraining order against them. The patrolman informed Jessica that, in order to get a restraining order, she would have to go through the court process after filing a report. After saying goodbye to the officers, she promised to file a statement in person soon, but that was not destined to happen. The next day, while Jessica's family was out of town, she went to her parents' house early in the morning and took a .40 caliber pistol that they used for self-defense. When relatives heard about this, Jessica warned her father about the need for a weapon, and he was not against it. They did not suspect the scale of the persecution that Jessica had arranged. She skillfully lied, making Benjamin look worse and referring to the persecution from him, that the danger emanating from her ex. Jessica claimed that she could not feel calm at home, she was simply afraid to be left alone with her 2 children. They were easily convinced that Benjamin and Meredith posed a threat, including to the children, and that the weapon would help protect them from what she described as extremely harmful communication. All of this sounded plausible, therefore, her parents had no problem with her needing the weapon for a while. Jessica planned to keep the gun in the house while the divorce process was ongoing. Jessica then sent text messages filled with accusations, now targeting everyone who knew Meredith. She managed to find information about the family and friends of Meredith, copying the messages to everyone, then telling them how Meredith had stolen her husband, destroyed her family, and was now trying to take the children. Jessica obtained the phone numbers of at least 5 friends of family members on social media. It seems she was immersed in this all day, displaying behavior that resembled madness. She even personally called several people, relaying her story over her mobile phone. Some of Jessica's acquaintances became disappointed in her decency, causing real damage to her reputation. Benjamin also received even more terrifying messages. Jessica openly accused and intimidated him, stating that he would not receive anything, he would not gain access to Meredith and the children. Jessica wrote that because of his actions, he would have no chance of getting any of it, as she would not allow him to enjoy life after what he had done. Benjamin was extremely worried about this information and began to send Jessica message after message, trying to understand what she meant. However, she simply ignored all his questions, which only increased Benjamin's anxiety. He expressed his willingness to go to court for an emergency hearing regarding joint custody of the children, even threatened to try to take the children from her if she did not calm down. Finally, Jessica responded with a short message, "Your life will soon be better." Benjamin was sure that she was just mocking him and enjoying this situation. Jessica claimed that it was the last day she would experience pain, after which she ignored any attempts by Benjamin to contact her. On the morning of July 13, 2017, Jessica wrote to Benjamin again. She offered to meet so that Benjamin could answer some questions. However, Benjamin found everything very suspicious and hesitated to attend the meeting. He didn't suspect that this could turn out to be a fatal mistake. Benjamin tried to get her to talk on the phone to understand what she needed and why they couldn't discuss it without a meeting, but this only made Jessica even angrier. At 4:41 p.m., he received another message in which Jessica complained that she was tired of this bullying that never meant anything to Benjamin. In reality, old accusations and the most frightening threats she had ever voiced since the breakup emerged. Jessica's behavior was so alarming that Benjamin contacted her mother to discuss the situation, suspecting that Jessica was having a breakdown. He feared she could not control herself, might pose a danger to herself and the children. At that time, he was at work and could not leave. He did not suspect that while he was talking to Jessica's mother, Jessica was already driving to his apartment with bad intentions. At about 5 p.m., Jessica parked her car near the complex where Benjamin and Meredith lived. In the parking lot, Jessica saw Meredith, who had just returned from work and was sitting in her car, distracted by the mail on her mobile phone. Jessica approached her, pointed a gun, and shot through the glass, instantly killing her rival, whom she considered the cause of all her troubles. All this happened in broad daylight, as people were returning from work. The noise attracted numerous witnesses. After the incident, people saw Jessica get into her car and drive away. Neighbors contacted the police, reporting this and clarifying one frightening detail. At that time, there were 2 children in the car with the shooter. Witnesses described the shooter, and the police understood who they were talking about. They assumed that Benjamin was in danger. Jessica had enough time to act, but she was not going to go to Benjamin's workplace. Instead, she devised something much more sophisticated and stayed one step ahead of law enforcement. While the authorities were still looking for her in the city and were awaiting Benjamin's arrival at work, Jessica called Benjamin, told him that everyone he loved had left and that she would be next. Then Jessica hung up. It was the last call she made. Police eventually traced the call and went to Easley, 7 miles from the Benjamin home, where they saw her Jeep. The doors of the car were locked from the inside, and the engine was still running. Inside, they found 3 bodies, 2 children and Jessica herself, who was 36 years old. Jessica had persistently called Benjamin in hopes of meeting with him, perhaps intending him to be her first victim. However, he seemed to sense danger and avoided contact as much as possible, often opting to respond via a message on a messaging app. When she received a refusal, she flared up in anger and attacked Meredith, after which Jessica returned home. Near her house, she called Benjamin again. After a meaningless conversation, Jessica first attacked her 5-year-old daughter, then her 9-year-old son, after which she turned the gun on herself. Jessica used the same gun that she had borrowed from her parents on July 11th. During the investigation, detectives found out that Benjamin had been trying to obtain a restraining order against Jessica. He had filed for joint custody on the same day and had communicated with the police officer who came to check on the children. Jessica left 4 suicide notes, 1 for her mother, 1 for her father, 1 for her son's father, and 1 for her husband. In these notes, she expressed her love for her family and her regret for the pain her actions would cause them. Jessica insisted that she could no longer live with these feelings and believed that her children would also suffer without her, so she decided to take not only her life but theirs as well. In the letter to her son's father, she expressed gratitude for giving her her first child and apologized for the pain she had caused. Considering the content of these notes, the police investigated suspicions of domestic violence against the children. Judging by what Jessica wrote, it was possible she had harmed them as a way of exacting revenge on her unfaithful husband. However, nothing like this could be confirmed. As for the last note left by Jessica to Benjamin, it contained several short phrases in which she wished that Benjamin would experience the pain from his cruel act for the rest of his life. The note also stated that he would not be able to hurt them anymore. Among all the individuals involved in this case, Benjamin was the only survivor. The note turned out to be prophetic. Even to this day, he continues to live with the pain of losing his loved ones. Calgary, Canada, nicknamed Cowtown, is a sprawling cosmopolitan community that grew rich from its role in the Canadian oil industry. Although Calgary is both cutting-edge and modern, it is also Canada's #1 rodeo destination, and its deep-rooted agricultural history is where the name Cowtown originates. It is here, in the quiet southeastern suburb of Ogden, that we meet Lisa Mitchell. Lisa was born in 1981, and she was one of 2 sisters. While the girls were growing up, their mother, Peggy, took care of them both. She loved her daughters very much but also taught them to be independent. When Lisa was 4 years old, Peggy could already tell that her daughter would be unique. The girl was sociable, expressed her creativity through art and music. In high school, Lisa made many friends with whom she eventually formed a girl group. She graduated from high school with average grades but excelled in creative subjects such as art and music. After finishing school, Lisa held various positions at grocery stores and cafes, but above all, she wanted to work at various events, including concerts. This would give Lisa the opportunity to meet some of her favorite musicians. Soon, Lisa got a job at a private restaurant located in northeast Calgary. She liked the work and enjoyed the food there, but one of the sushi chefs particularly appreciated her presence. This man's name was Alan Schieback. Although Alan was actually shy and reserved, he managed to start a conversation with Lisa. From that moment, they began to grow closer. Initially, their relationship was happy, but there were also problems. Lisa's parents did not like Alan because they thought he spoiled her mood. Lisa was always a sociable, cheerful young girl who loved to take risks and express her emotions. In contrast, Alan was much more reserved, calculating, and suspicious of anything. Eventually, these differences created cracks in their relationship, and the situation became tense. After 5 years of living together, they eventually separated. Lisa started dating other men again, and although it seemed she had forgotten Alan, he could not say the same. Alan found it difficult to move on after their breakup, and so a few months later, he reappeared in Lisa's life, begging for a second chance. Lisa tried to forget him while dating again, but none of the men she met fulfilled her desires. So, when Alan presented her with an engagement ring right before her eyes, their relationship resumed quickly. However, despite the engagement, the quarrels also resumed. They decided to start a family. First, they had a son, and after 2 years, a daughter arrived. They tried their best to make their children happy, but they themselves had a hard time. Alan worked during the day while Lisa stayed home with the children, and in the evenings, after dinner, the spouses would switch places. This way of life began to strain them both. Fatigue accumulated, and the changing work schedules took away the time that they could spend together. Often, the time they did find led to arguments, which became increasingly heated and fierce, eventually escalating into physical confrontations. Alan and Lisa went so far as to pinch, slap each other. After 10 years of marriage and 2 children, they both felt they had no other choice but to try to improve their relationship. It seemed better to break up and seek new happiness. Lisa's wise mother thought the same. She often urged her daughter to end things with Alan and return home, where she would always be there to offer her support. In recent years, Lisa and Peggy had become very close, not only in relationship but also due to distance. In 2011, when Lisa got a second job at the Longview Hotel, only an hour's drive from her mother's house, the reason was that Alan had lost his job again, and Lisa often had to work overtime to make ends meet. This, of course, caused tension between the spouses. While Alan often stayed home with the kids, Lisa frequently stayed with her mother to have time and perhaps take a break from Alan. In October, at the hotel, there was an event in honor of Halloween, and Lisa was among the invitees. She agreed to go, taking her mother with her. Since Lisa had worked the next day, she decided to spend the night at her mother's house. They had a great time at the party, and everything went smoothly. The next morning, on October 29, 2012, Peggy hugged her daughter before taking her to work, but from that moment on, everything would change. Despite sending numerous messages, Peggy did not receive a response from Lisa for several days, which was unusual since Lisa always replied promptly. After checking on some information, Peggy found out that Lisa had stopped showing up at work. After that day, calls to Lisa and her family went unanswered. No one read her messages. Peggy began to worry seriously and decided to visit the Shyback residence. As she approached the front door, she knocked, not knowing who would answer. Later, Peggy said that Alan opened the door, and the first question she asked was, "Where is Lisa?" Alan replied that Lisa had left him. He claimed she ran away on Monday after an argument. He said that after they seemed to calm down, Lisa had sent him to buy cigarettes, and when he returned after 15 to 20 minutes, she was no longer at home. The conversation took place in the hallway. Looking to the right, Peggy noticed that Lisa's shoes and favorite jacket were still in the house. Since it was October, Peggy wondered where Lisa could have gone without dressing properly. She then told Alan that she wanted to see the rest of the house. As she walked through, she noted several of her daughter's personal belongings. However, she did not find Lisa's handbag, but she noticed that the jewelry Lisa always wore was still in its place. Lisa was nowhere to be found. Alan then claimed that after Lisa left, she had sent him an email. He asked Peggy to check her inbox, and indeed Lisa had written a letter to her mother. In this letter, she expressed how unhappy she was and that she needed to leave to clear her head. She wrote that they would soon contact each other more than once. There was something very strange about these letters. They were very different from her usual letters and lacked warmth and filled feelings. This time was tormenting for Peggy. She slept every night next to the phone in case her daughter called. Then, at 4:45 a.m. on November 16th, a very strange voice message was received. Peggy could not remember it word for word, but she realized that Lisa was fine. At the end of the voice message, Lisa said, "He is at home, I have to go." Peggy was confused. Who is at home? Where to go? She wondered if there was someone next to Lisa controlling her or if she was chained in a basement. This mysterious message prompted Peggy to decide to contact the police and initiate an investigation into the disappearance of Lisa Mitchell. The police first questioned those who had last seen Lisa and also visited the house where she lived. However, they did not find anything unusual there. The house was clean and tidy, except for the basement, which, like all basements, was full of junk. Checking the bank history and phone activity was unsuccessful. Lisa had not called or sent messages, and her funds on the cards had not been used since her disappearance. The case was treated as a missing persons case, and progress was slow. However, after more than 1 year, 3 months after Lisa's disappearance, Alan was finally interviewed by authorities to learn more about his relationship with his wife. He revealed that his relationship with Lisa had been rocky for the past decade. Alan also stated that his wife had dated other men while they were still living together and that he had found her profile on several dating sites. The information Alan provided was helpful to the police, but he still remained a suspect. Alan said that he had not heard from Lisa for several months. There is an expression that when a person disappears, their silence can be the loudest thing imaginable. As the investigation into Lisa's disappearance was delayed, the authorities decided to take extreme measures. Very rarely do people voluntarily remain missing for so long, and the police understood this. In connection with the change in local privacy laws, the police received the right to search for missing persons and study accounts, phone records. They were able to analyze the voice message that Lisa left for her mother a year ago. The phone from which the voice message was sent was traced back to Alan's number. Interestingly, Alan told the police that he had not heard from Lisa since she disappeared in October 2012, changing the authorities' view of him. Now that the case had become a criminal investigation, investigators were allowed access to all of his information, including his bank records. What they found was disturbing. It was revealed that back in 2012, Alan had made a rather strange purchase. He had gone to a local hardware store to buy gloves, bleach, a large plastic tub, a body mat, road salt, a wooden board, and concrete, items that the police would call a burial kit. The officers were troubled by this, but despite this evidence, the authorities felt it was not enough to arrest Alan. They needed something more, perhaps a confession. Based on this idea, a project called Aurora was created. It was a special operation aimed at achieving an eventual confession, and there was no easier way than through friendship. On December 4, 2013, a Thursday with temperatures well below zero, visibility in the area was quite good. That is why it was a real shock for Alan when a young woman crashed into his car in the parking lot of his workplace. She approached him to apologize, stating that it was an accident and that she would be happy to share her contact details to sort out the insurance. At first, Alan seemed unhappy, but eventually, he accepted the offer. Unknown to Alan, the woman was actually an undercover police officer. She told Alan that her boss would pay for any damage. That boss was also an undercover officer. The operation officially began. Several undercover officers were involved in maintaining the artificial friendship between Alan and his new friend. For instance, some female officers pretended to be nannies. They managed to become friends with Alan, who became so close to some of these imaginary friends that he even invited them out for drinks and to events. As for the first female officer, he politely invited her on a date, to which she, of course, gently declined. All these police officers slowly but surely approached Alan and his secrets in the hope that over time, they would obtain some kind of confession from him. To their credit, they had all been working for about a year, and their efforts were finally rewarded in December 2014 when a breakthrough was made. Feeling confident that a strong enough connection had been established between them and Alan, a plan was enacted to elicit the long-awaited confession. One of the officers arranged a trip by train to Winnipeg, which is more than 130 miles from Alan's home. As they were driving in Alan's car, a phone rang. It was the officer calling from the station to inform Alan that the status of Lisa's case had changed. Authorities now believed they were dealing with a murder, and officers were coming to his residence to search the house. On December 5, 2014, almost all the details of Lisa's disappearance finally became known. Alan, who was riding in the car with an undercover officer, said that he was in trouble, without going into details. The officer offered to help Alan and his children disappear, putting Alan in touch with a man who promised to assist him. This man was also an undercover officer. While the meeting was taking place, the police were already conducting a search at Alan's place. Unfortunately, they soon made a tragic and horrifying discovery in the basement of the family home. In the farthest corner of the house, cluttered with all sorts of junk, police found the remains of Lisa, crudely cemented and buried with a plastic bag. Her body was covered in cat litter and salt, indicating that the body had not decomposed naturally. Lisa's remains were partially mummified. Unfortunately, Alan had killed his wife, the mother of his children, and then hidden her under the house, where he continued to live upstairs for 26 months with his 2 children. During his meeting with the undercover officer, who promised to help Alan disappear, he felt compelled to explain why he needed to hide. He said that he and Lisa had a difficult relationship. They argued and then tried to make peace. He could not even remember what the argument was about that evening. When they went to sleep separately, he saw that Lisa had come to his bed, and he did not know what she wanted. He raised his hand and began to strangle her. He remembered holding the body while Lisa was convulsing. He then thought he needed to send a few text messages and emails to make people believe she had voluntarily disappeared. Afterward, he cleaned the scene of Lisa's death with bleach 2 or 3 times to ensure that no trace was left. There are several details in this case that indicate Alan was not the smartest of criminals, but one of his plans to cover up the crime was quite complex. He faked a voicemail that was supposedly left for Peggy by Lisa, stitching together several of Lisa's calls using a special program installed on her phone. Police found Alan searching online for body decomposition, salt, lime, concrete, lack of air, insects, between December 2012 and 2014, along with searches for Lisa Mitchell and murder laws. All this evidence, combined with Alan's candid conversation with the undercover officer, was enough for the officers to finally arrest him. He was charged with second-degree murder of Lisa Mitchell. It took more than 3 years to bring a case against Alan. The authorities should have taken his mental health into account, as it became known that he suffered from bipolar disorder. There was also a possibility that Alan acted in self-defense, as he claimed. In September 2017, Alan was finally brought to trial for Lisa's murder. The judge did not believe he had acted in self-defense, as the force he used against Lisa far outweighed any defensive actions. On the other hand, the judge did not believe that Alan had intended to kill his wife. In the end, he was not found guilty of second-degree murder. Instead, he was found guilty of the lesser crime of manslaughter, along with the abuse of a body. Alan Scheibach was sentenced to a short term of 7 years behind bars, though this term was later increased to 10 years. During his sentence, Alan was granted parole and was free for only 1 day. He grossly violated the rules of his freedom, and an excessive amount of medication for bipolar disorder was found in his home. However, Alan did not have to serve the full 10-year sentence and was released early. He is now a free man but is not allowed to contact Peggy or his children. Although Alan did not serve much of a prison sentence for Lisa's murder, he was given a strange punishment after discovering that most of his friends were undercover cops. This truth was deeply heartbreaking for him, and he would likely struggle with his issues for much of his life. Lisa's children live with their grandmother. Peggy says that in her grandchildren, she sees a lot of her daughter and is happy to watch them grow up. She describes her grandchildren as bright, outgoing, and cheerful, just like their mother was. It's hard to say what happened the night Lisa was killed. Was it self-defense or cold-blooded murder? The only thing we can be sure of is that Lisa was taken from this world too early. Described as a bright soul and caring daughter, she was also a loving, hard-working mother who held 2 jobs so that her children would have warmth and food. Unfortunately, her death means that her children are now left without a mother or father. The case of Lisa Mitchell is not only a heartbreaking story of loss, but also a reminder of the complexities of family relationships and the consequences of unresolved conflicts. Lisa's life, though cut short, was marked by her love for her children, her creativity, and her relentless optimism. Although Alan paid the price for his actions, that punishment cannot erase the pain that Lisa's family, especially her mother, Peggy, and her 2 children, have endured. Peggy now serves as a rock for her grandchildren, nurturing them with love and hope, just as Lisa did. The story ends on a sad note, but it also affirms that, although Lisa is no longer with us, her light continues to shine through the people she loved and the memories she left behind.